Present currently are myself acting as chairperson, Kieran Lannon, Matt Lee, Bob Mather, Andrew Williamson, and from town staff, we have John Wenzel, we have our planning director, Ron, Ali Slayton. She was just here. Erica Jensen was just here and she'll be right back. And I don't have a virtual meeting up, so I'm not sure do we have our liaison with us?
I do not see our liaison.
Our liaison said she would be late.
Okay.
She would be here as soon as she could.
At any rate, I think we can get started with the approval of minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Sure. I move to approve the minutes dated September 21st, 2022 as presented.
I second.
Kieran, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Matt, yes.
Bob, yes.
Andrew, yes.
And the next item is staff announcements.
Thank you. I have put at your places the 2023 calendar with the proposed HARC meeting dates. Traditionally, the third Wednesday of each month. We'd like to stick with that schedule. It keeps all of the meetings at least 4 or 5 weeks apart, which is optimal. And keeping them consistent also helps now, since we still have a version on Zoom. It helps with noticing and our Zoom registration and what's it called, paper Zoom meeting consistency.
Oh, yeah.
So if you see any glaring conflicts, let me know. I provided it this month just to give you a little time to review and look at your own calendars. I think next time I'll bring it back for a formal approval, but I thought it might be helpful to get it to you a little bit early. If you have any feedback, happy to hear it now, or you can email me.
It looks consistent with past meetings.
Great. I see Mark on the screen. Welcome, Mark.
Sorry, there's a new trick here,
Yeah.
and I'm an old dog.
That is it for staff announcements. I do have the public hearing slide available if you want to go over that.
Okay, and Stacy, thanks for kicking off the meeting, and I'll go as long as I can go here. I've got something none of you want to have, but the good news is you're not going to get it because I'm virtual. Okay.
I'm gonna get it from you.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to get it from me. Okay. I don't wish this on anybody. Okay. Well, with respect to our hearing process, I'll just go through the 8 reminders of the steps. The HARC chair introduces the project. The staff gives a presentation, then answers HARC's questions. The applicant gives a presentation and then answers questions for 30 minutes or less with the applicant. The public will then be invited to make comments on the specific project. We ask for 3 minutes or less per person. There's no dialogue allowed between public, applicants, and HARC members. So we cannot talk, but the applicant will then address any comments made by the public in the rebuttal. Public comment will end. The applicant may rebut any comments made by the public. Well, that's a redundant note. Yeah, well, follow up with any rebut, and then we will go into deliberation. So that's the process. If you'd help us with cooperating with the public tonight, thank you. And I think, Jonna, did you already do the non-agenda items, public comment?
We
No.
did not. That's the next thing on the agenda.
Okay, so sorry. And so public comment on non-agenda items, if you would raise your hand. And I don't see anybody raising their hand electronically or calling in. I guess I was the only one on the phone there for a minute. So if there are none, we'll go on to the review and recommendation items. The first item is, of course, the land use code amendment. It's the review and recommendation from HARC to P&Z Commission regarding an amendment to the Town of Telluride Land Use Code at Article 5, Division 1, development review procedures in Article 6, Division 3, PUD, Article 6, Division 4, subdivision, Article 7, Division 1, Historic Preservation Overlay District, Article 7, Division 2, Alteration, Addition, and Erection, and alternate Article 9, Division 2, Historic and Architecture Review Commissions. Staff member Ron Corals and Planning and Building Director, and Jonna Wenzel, Historic Preservation Director. Please go ahead. I think we've all read it.
Thank you, Mark. So this is an item that you've seen before, meeting work session, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Of course, Jonna's responsible for preparing these ordinance amendments. And it has been reviewed by the legal department, or Ally, our assistant town attorney. There are two objectives of this ordinance. The first is to reduce the number of review and recommendations that are provided by HARC to the Planning and Zoning Commission. For projects that are not consistent with the HARC role to review the consistent design guidelines. The second is to impede the flow of applications by adjusting HARC application types and giving more of the reviews to the HARC chair and staff. Under the first objective, HARC will continue to review recommendations for the land use code amendments that affect the historic landmark district or the transitional hillside treatment area. It will also provide review and recommendations for zoning map amendments or zoning changes, which we really don't see very many of those come through our office. Since I've been here, I've seen only one application. HARC will no longer provide review and recommendation for minor subdivisions, preliminary plats, for large scale or small scale subdivisions. Small scale PUDs. It will only provide review and recommendation on large scale PUDs at a work session, if that's at the discretion of the historic preservation director, and if it involves a historic landmark district or affects height, mass, and scale. Under the second objective, the classification application types will be more directly aligned with the location, whether it's inside the landmark district or outside the landmark district. If it's in the historic landmark district, the classification of large-scale residential and commercial activities will not change in terms of the area of new construction and addition. Demolition of THAS rated structures will also continue to be reviewed as large-scale activities. Extensions for small scale and large scale will still be considered small scale activities, as well as designations or challenges to designations of historic structures, relocations, demolitions of non-rated structures, and alteration to interiors. So generally, the changes to the area threshold of new construction and additions are modified so that some of the activities that were considered large scale will now be small scale. Some of the activities that were small scale will now be minor scale, and some of the minor activities are now insubstantial. Again, the changes will result in more reviews that go to the HARC chair and staff rather than to the full commission. For activities that are outside the historic landmark district, demolitions of rated THA structures will remain as large-scale activities. Otherwise, there will be no large-scale activities outside the historic landmark district.
In the residential.
In the residential zone district. The threshold on area of construction and additions will be changed for residential and commercial small scale minor scale and insubstantial activities, so that more of the projects again are reviewed by chair or staff and less by the full commission. So in summary, the changes that staff is recommending will again make it or improve the flow of review. I believe John has the motion for your consideration. If you do desire to recommend this go forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission. If you do make that recommendation, it's planned to go before P and Z at their next meeting, which is next week, October 27th. And then to town council for first reading in the second meeting in November, and possibly the second meeting in December. That concludes the presentation.
So you have the draft ordinance in the packet that was added a little bit later in the week last week with the additions and changes. And I also have a slide of a proposed motion I will put up on the screen. You could also add additional recommendations or changes if you find they're needed. So here's the motion. You know, the bracket here is optional if you have recommended revisions. If not, you can skip that. But your motion will be to recommend or not approval to P&Z for those to move on. Do you have any questions about the changes in the draft?
Just can you confirm, John, have there been anything substantial that's changed from the last time you presented this to us?
Nothing's changed.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to be clear, a project that is outside of the THLD, but inside the historic preservation overlay district would change to a chair review.
It still depends on the floor area.
Okay. Right, so if it's large scale, it would,
So in the residential zone districts outside of the historic district, we're eliminating the large scale category. So any residential projects in those zone districts outside of the historic district would be small scale.
Okay.
And what's happening outside the historic district is for some of these categories, they're just sliding down one scale.
Yep.
In the historic district, they're pretty much staying the same. It's just the thresholds for minor and small scale have gone up slightly.
Any other questions, Jonna? I mean, I think it's exactly what was intended, and thank you and Jonna and Ron for good job. And as Jonna said, it's just that some have shifted by square footage categories, which means the chair is taking on more and the staff taking on more to debottleneck the entire board. For which I have to say the last 2 months, I haven't even had any chair meetings to sink my teeth into. So I'm very supportive of this and get back to work. So any other questions?
yeah, I just have one more. The staff and or the chair would still have the discretion to elevate it back.
Absolutely, yes. And just to reiterate what Ron said, I mean, our intent, our hope is to have this approved through council by the end of the year and hopefully start next year under these new classification.
Okay. Any other questions? And Jonna, do we need to take public comment on this?
It's not required. It's not a public hearing. You may if you'd like, and if you see anybody's hands up, you certainly can.
Okay. Well, we always welcome it if somebody has a question from the public or a comment, but I'm not seeing any. And not seeing any. Go ahead.
It's slid up a little bit.
It's slid up a little bit, so it depends on whether, it depends on whether it's in the historic district or outside the historic district. So inside the historic district, It'll be, and again, it also depends on whether it's residential zone districts or commercial zone districts.
Residential.
In the residential zone districts inside the historic district, small scale will be between 950 and 2,500 square feet. And anything over that will be large scale. Just pretty much how it is now. It was, small scale was 750 square feet to 25 square feet, and that's just bumped up a little bit.
How about outside?
Outside the historic district. In residential zone districts, again, there'll just be small scale applications of 2,500 square feet or more. And in the commercial zone districts, it's staying the same. It'll be large scale 5,000 square feet or more and small scale 2,500 square feet to 5,000.
Could you please state your name for my minutes?
Okay, Peters.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are we ready for a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I move to recommend to P and Z approval of the proposed land use code amendments as provided in the draft ordinance presented to HARC at the October 19th, 2022 regular HARC meeting. We have no revisions I know of. This motion is based on findings presented at a public meeting held on October 19th, 2022, with notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code.
Karen will second.
Okay. Let's vote.
Kieran,
Kieran.
yes.
Stacy, yes.
Matt, yes.
Bob, yes.
Mark, yes.
Andrew, yes.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the motion, and thank you again, staff. This is a great productivity tool, and its time has come.
I hope it works out the way we intend.
Okay. Thanks, Ron. See ya. Okay. Let's go ahead and move on then to the public hearing items, starting with 459 West Dakota. It's consideration of a final large-scale new construction in the Hillside Transitional Zone District, which will contain more than 2,500 square foot. Floor area per land use code 7203A1. Legal description is lots 3, 5R, and 8 in block 6 of Dakota Edition at 459 West Dakota. It's in the Hillside Transitional Zone. Owner is Golden Thoughts LLC. Applicant Chris Hawkins, Alpine Planning and CCY Architects. Staff member Jonna Wenzel. Jonna.
Okay, thank you. The final review of 459 Dakota Avenue. It's been a while. The preliminary was approved on November 17th, 2021. Some of you may have had a chance to review the recording of that if you weren't involved with HARC or just wanted a reminder because that was some time ago. So I will orient one to the site, which is located on the north side of Dakota Avenue, adjacent to Cornet Creek. It is outside the historic landmark district, inside the historic preservation overlay district. The zone district is hillside transitional, and the treatment area is transitional hillside with River Park corridor overlay because of its adjacency to Cornet Creek. Also, because of its adjacency to Cornet Creek, there is a 25-foot wetland setback, which has been approved by the planning director, will be approved in a final state after HARC's approval of the final development. So the existing, I wanted to mention that there are 3 lots here, lot 3, lot 5R, and lot 8, which are all under the same ownership. In the new development plan, there are improvements planned for lot 8, which are more outdoor terraces and patios. So the existing house, which is known as the Nutmeg House, was built in 1987 and is not designated historic. It contains about 5,200 square feet of floor area, which is well over today's maximum allowed floor area of 4,000 square feet. And the existing house encroaches into the wetlands along Cornet Creek. As fantastic as this house is, the architectural style and character probably wouldn't be approved under the current design guidelines if it were seeking HARC approval today. So the proposal is to demolish the existing house and construct a new single-family house in its place with a similar but smaller footprint and respecting the wetland setback. The demolition of the house was approved on November 17th, 2021, subject to approval of the final development plan, which is what we're reviewing tonight. So there's no further action required for the demolition. And the bridge over the creek, as it exists now, will stay. It's to remain. So at the preliminary approval on November 17th, 2021, the application was approved with 11 conditions, which I will go through, starting with number 1. If any trees are removed other than those shown, they will be subject to a tree removal permit and any required mitigation fees. There was some conversation about this in the applicant's revised narrative, which I'll talk about in just a minute, because this is a condition that it has been retained. Number 2 is to indicate location of drainage and retention areas. The drainage plan has been provided in the plan set on sheet C3. Condition number 3 was to minimize the driveway paving and consider modular pavers. So it appears that the width of the driveway perhaps has been narrowed a bit near the garage. It appears that maybe it's been extended a bit at the guest parking area. The driveway has been revised to have modular pavers. I would ask the applicant to maybe describe more of the changes or if some of the paving has been reduced at the driveway. Condition number 4 was to ensure that the metal roof has a matte finish to minimize glare. Previously, they had proposed a different material, zinc shingles, I believe. That's been revised to be bonderized standing seam metal, which has a matte finish. Condition number 5 was to reduce the glazing at the east and west elevations. So the glazing on the east and west elevations appears to have been reduced pretty significantly. As you can see, the previous plans had very large windows on those elevations, which have been reduced throughout. Condition number 6 was to revise the skylights so that they don't penetrate the ridge line. They did previously. The skylights have been moved onto the north slope of the roof so that it no longer penetrates the ridge. Condition number 7 was to revise the doors so that all doors are no more than 2/3 light. The doors, details of the doors have been provided in the packet, and they are shown to be solid or no more than 2/3 light. Condition number 8 was to provide solid deck railings on the east side deck. Previously, it was an open, transparent railing. The amount of railing has been reduced, and the railing is now solid steel panels. Condition number 9 was to incorporate traits of historic buildings in the town at large, such as eaves, overhangs, alternative roofing material, breaking up the ridge line, modifying the south building facade on the south building to become more traditional versus the cantilevered window. So here's a rendering of the previous proposal. The facades have been revised. However, I don't know that the architectural character has changed significantly. Materials have changed, windows have changed. Solar panels have been added. The large chimney has been removed, but I don't think the character has changed. The architectural design and style of this house is very specific. And so I think that the applicants will want to discuss this condition with you further. Condition number 10 was to reduce the size and appearance of the driveway as seen from Dakota and add landscaping. As I mentioned before, it appears that some of the driveway maybe has been reduced, the pavers have been added, but there is a significant amount of landscaping proposed along the driveway, along Dakota Avenue between the driveway and the house. I'm sorry, between the street and the house. And condition number 11 was clapboard siding should not extend to the ground. The materials have been revised and the siding does not extend. So upon review of the revised plan, staff has some proposed new conditions. Again, new materials have been proposed, which include granite, a lot of granite, and granite is not a traditional or locally found type of stone, and so staff recommends that the stone be revised to a more traditional or local type of stone. Condition number 2 is to provide a clear distinction between the foundation and wall materials. Again, a lot of granite, a lot of stone at the foundation and wall materials. The design guidelines recommend that a clear distinction is made between the foundation and wall materials. Condition number 3 was to revise the north and south windows to be consistent with the guidelines. The applicants did a good job of reducing the glazing on the east and west sides, but added it on the north and south sides. And quite a large amount of glazing was added on the north, which will not be seen from town or Dakota, but will be seen from the Judweeby Trail. And additional glazing was added on the south with an open covered deck on the south facade. Condition number 4 was on upper level decks and balconies, provide the can lights and wall sconces to step lights number that are above ground level that should be step lights. Condition number 5 was to use the lowest wattage light fixtures possible and as few fixtures as possible on the bridge and in the area of the creek, because it is in the River Park corridor overlay, there's great sensitivity to light spill. And condition number 6 was to limit the number of can lights at the garage. The guidelines recommend not duplicating fixtures to light the same area. Condition number 7 was to ensure that the solar panels extend above the ridge line. So the solar panels did extend above the ridge line in the revised plan set that I received a couple of months ago. And I asked that they be lowered, and I don't know if they were lowered or ridge cap was added, and so that should be clarified. It still appears that these solar panel racks or frames extend above the ridge line, so I want to make sure that that's addressed. And condition number 8 was to ensure the solar panel racks and frames are non-reflective. These were conditions from the previous conditions that I have held over, which have to do with removing trees. I know that the applicants asked that this be modified to just be those trees affected by construction. This is added just as a reminder that any trees that are being removed on the property are required to get a tree removal permit. It doesn't matter if they're affected by construction, if they're affected by wind damage or whatever, a permit is still required. And there are quite a large number of trees on the property, especially lot 8. Retained condition number 10 was to include utility locations and protective roofs on the final CA plans. And conditions regarding the demolition, which is subject to the issuance of the building permit for the replacement structure, and that the structure and materials be offered for sale or salvage. And they were kind enough to include a letter in their packet about the possibility of recycling those materials of the existing house. So with that, that was a lot. Happy to answer any questions. And I see Chris Hawkins is on the screen. He and the architects from CCY will be presenting for that.
Okay, questions for Jonna? Just go ahead and speak up.
It's all quiet here, Mark.
Yeah, I have one. And you mentioned it in the memo, back to our old condition number 9. which we will talk to them about. But it appears they did none of those 5 things. And my real question is, do you, even though there's not, as in many districts, a ridge length maximum, we asked them to break it up. And I think we were going under the context of neighborhood or context, of the neighborhood and being right next and adjacent to the historic district. Did that, I guess I just wondered why you didn't make that a continued condition, although you did suggest we talked to them, but did you not feel strongly about that?
So I don't know, I don't believe this was a staff condition at the preliminary review. I think this came out of HARC's discussion with the applicant and during deliberation and comments from the neighbors.
Yeah.
Again, as I just mentioned a few moments ago, I feel like the design is very specific and it's intended to be very contemporary. I think that clearly the design intent is to keep it contemporary and not add eave overhangs or traditional materials, because that's not what they're going for. So again, I mean, I hope you'll have that conversation. I'm sure that the applicants will talk about it as well.
Okay. All right. Well, unless somebody else has a question, let's move on. And Chris, you want to open it up or?
Yes, thank you. There's a little bit of a technical issue we're having this evening. The town's protocols for signing into Zoom have changed with a confirmation email. And so CCY Architects is not getting those emails. They've checked their junk mail. It's just a new protocol that was started. I'm not sure if Piper can override that in or what, but
It's just a new Zoom protocol, Chris. It's not anything on our end, and all of us have discovered that just this evening. So sorry for any confusion.
oh, I see Alex has joined there. I see his face behind you, so he made it.
Okay.
Never mind. So, all right, thank you very much. Chris Hawkins with Alpine Planning. Oh, sorry. Let me get to my presentation. So we just want to give an overview at first for especially the new HARC members this evening. This site design is a big function of its topography and the geology of the site with what is in essence, here's the existing home on here, and you'll see how it's influenced. It's right up against Cornet Creek overall, and the lots that John has already gone over. And then the site outside the historic district. The site is.
I'm not seeing your screen if you were intending to share it.
Oh, I had hit share. Let me try again. We're full of Zoom fun tonight. Sorry.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you. Appreciate you let me know that. So again, the location well outside the historic district. And then when we get into the real parameters that influence design, you've got the Cornet Creek floodplain coming down through the site. And you can see a big part of the existing structures in that site. There's also a wetland setback on the lot that influences the design overall. This is the existing condition survey. You can really see how it's right up against the creek. And so a major part of the design team's goal was to relocate the new house, and create a much safer, better house that conforms to the River Park overlay standards and also the town's wetland regulations. So when you're looking at this, you can see a little bit of the town's wetland setback applied on this. And then on top of that, you've got the floodplain coming down through the site. And then rockfall in the back, which is easily mitigatable, as we all know. And what, in essence, you end up with, if you look at the town's wetland setback and rockfall setbacks, everything, is you get kind of a triangular shaped lot that has really influenced the proposed cross gable design of the house. So John went over all the nonconformities, the height greater than 40 feet, the floor area, it's about 2,000 square feet over. non-conformant with floodplain and wetland regulations and as well HARC guidelines. These are the existing wetland setback encroachments. And the proposed house, this shows the existing encroachments. And then the proposed house is pulling this well outside the wetland setback area and creating a much better situation overall. Again, part of these this was an approval that was already granted by town staff, where there's just a minor portion of the driveway is encroaching in here, bridge, stormwater infiltration in this location, and then some limited roof overhang. So under proposed design, if you could please let Alex share his screen, I'm going to stop sharing.
Who's going to share on our behalf if we got just a second here?
I will need to be unmuted though.
Give us 1 second, or Chris.
There you
could-
go.
There we go.
There you
All
go.
right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your patience. Sorry for the technical glitches here. Okay. So, and Sean, if you would pass the overview to sort of new proposal. Okay, sounds good. So next series of slides really just look at the design that's in your application, sort of the street view walking down Dakota, looking at the project. I think since preliminary, there have been a number of developments to the project. I think at the time, there's quite a bit of discussion about level of character and interest. So we'll walk through a number of details later on here as far as how we address specific details, but largely, right, adding a lot of texture to the siding on the south and the east and west ends of the gable, and breaking up the roof plane and the ridges with the addition of solar panels and ridge caps, and the incorporation of eaves, rake details, and some window trim that we've looked at. Maybe back up two real quick, Sean, if we could. I think one big development, all right, there we go. That's perfect. Next one. One big development that wasn't present at preliminary was sort of the carving out of the deck, what is a deck on the upper form, which previously was a little bit stark. So adds quite a bit of depth and character to the building and breaks up the mass that is along that east-west portion of the gable. So material-wise, I think similar to preliminary, strong stone base, locks to the earth, and then more light tone woods that for the upper portions of the gable. There are black accents in steel, and then roof is a bonderized standing seam, meant to be matte and sort of neutral tones of gray, and matte solar panels that make up quite a bit of the roof surface, but I think also add interest and definition to the roof forms. I think as Chris mentioned, we've been working with BG Building Works and Cassandra and Gideon on really this hopeful goal, the goal of this project really being net zero. So through any number of instruments between passive and active solar, some passive house strategies, and the incorporation of ground source heat pump, which the diagram on the right shows the well locations. I think we're making good strides in that direction, as well as high performance envelope. I think I saw that Sherry is on to talk through some landscape developments. Or Sam.
I think the clerk would have to allow them to speak for Sam.
Yes, and she just did. Hi, this is Sherry from Blue Green. Thank you for allowing us to speak about the landscape and planting design tonight. So as a part of final review, really the opportunity where we can present the planting design, though at our preliminary review, we did present a lot of the design intent and the concept, which I think is really beautifully presented in these renderings, is to incorporate native trees, including ones already on the site and within the creek corridor, shrubs and perennials, to really tie this home into the surrounding context and certainly into the creek scape itself. We also, as required, are proposing to revegetate all of the regraded or disturbed slopes as a part of the project. And the plan graphic, we hope illustrates the areas of where we would be presenting new planting as a part of the project. And also as a part of our wetlands approval, we committed to remove non-natives from the creek corridor that exists today and to replace those with native plants on the other areas of the project so that we have an entirely native natural landscape when we're complete. And so moving into how we've addressed conditions from our previous review, a few of those are landscape related, and then I'll hand it back to Alex for the architectural conditions. Great. So tree removal was discussed at length at our last meeting. We did confirm that the trees that we're highlighting in yellow are ones that would be needed to be removed for the construction of the home, and then also to allow for the ground source heat pumps as a part of the net zero goal that we're all very excited about. We have had an arborist review the trees in more depth since our last meeting and confirmed that most of the trees that we had already identified for removal have turned out to be in poor health. Were determined to be structurally unsound so that they would be found to be hazardous over time. And then again, the need for construction access and the utilities that have been proposed. There was a question at the last meeting. There's a small yellow tree kind of at the bottom of the property nearest the creek corridor. Thank you. There was a question about whether that tree was one of the cottonwoods that are in place now. And we've confirmed that it's not one of the cottonwoods. It's a small planted spruce tree that is planted right up against an existing wall that will be demoed as a part of the project. And because of the projected size of that tree as well, that's been flagged for removal as it's very site constrained. And then it's also within the footprint of the new driveway. And it's adjacent to the existing driveway today. Great. And then also as a part of our more detailed review tonight, the topic of site drainage and how we comply with the code is one that we wanted to further elaborate. We described a design intent at our previous meeting, which allowed for on-site drainage. So we're meeting that code requirement. The idea of filtering water as it moves off of the roofs, as we're accepting water off of our site, off of our non-impervious surfaces, treating that through a water quality system before it might make its way into the creek and then further downstream. So we've been able to incorporate that as we're working with the civil engineer, and that is a really strong part of our design. And everything you see in blue is a part of that infiltration system, including the slope lawn or native grass that would also allow for water infiltration. And then as Jonna described, we have looked at your suggestion, looked at permeable pavers for the driveway and have incorporated those into our design, which is, thank you, our next slide. And that is a part of our pervious system as well to help treat water. So we're very excited by that. Earlier tonight, Jonna asked the question if our driveway has increased in size. And basically, we've kind of pushed and pulled the driveway footprint to best address both vehicle movement as well as foot traffic as one gets in and out of a vehicle or comes up the driveway to go to this lower secondary entrance. And we feel like we've really maximized that and we believe we're a wash. We might be 10 square feet over what we showed last time, but we're very, very close. And if that's important, we can continue to look at that to get back down to the number that we might have presented at our previous meeting. And then also at the request of the commission, we've also looked at adding additional planting to help soften the appearance of the driveway and not make it as apparent as you're maybe viewing it from across the street, as this drawing would show.
Okay. So changing back to more architectural features, condition 4 of our prior was non-reflective roof materials. And I think, as I mentioned, we're committing to it's bonderized metal, as well as the matte solar panels on the roof. Go ahead. Condition 5 was reducing glazing on the east and west facades of the house. And so on the left is what was submitted at preliminary. On the right is what's included in your packet. And so on the west side here, we have a 42% reduction in the glass that we've proposed. And then on the east side, similar reduction of 25% reduction between preliminary and current. So while this was not necessarily a condition of our previous approval, it was mentioned, John, in your memo. So we did a comparison. On the left is preliminary submission and the window package associated with that. The south elevation. Thank you, Sean. On the right is what's in your package current, and there is close to a 10%, 8% actual reduction in the actual amount of glazing. It has redistributed some. There was quite a bit in the lower right previously, and that has since moved, relocated, elsewhere on the facade. We do think it's important also to talk about the north, and maybe even the next slide, Sean. So the north, there is a concentration of glass. I think in totality, there's a home reduction of 12% overall from the glazing package previously. John did mention the additional glass on the north. So there is a concentration there, but especially given the steepness of the site, the location of the site walls, we're really anticipating that those site walls capture any light bleed from that glass on the north. And given the steepness of the site, it is a condition where it rarely will be seen. Even from the Jeb Weeby Trail, you wouldn't necessarily get the view that's on the left. Skylight, at the time, preliminary, the skylight broke the ridge. We've since slid that, I think as John mentioned, onto the north aspect of the roof, taking it off of the south. Condition 7 was about 2/3 light doors. I think John had mentioned, right, we are now either all solid doors or committed to 2/3 light doors. Guardrail on the deck on the right. Thank you, Sean. So that has moved to solid plate steel as opposed to previously it was an open rail. And there's also a reduction in that deck, quite a substantial reduction. So on the left, blue, what's proposed, and let's click back. Red, what was included at preliminary. So by recessing that deck, we were able to pull that deck edge back in further from the road in Cornet Creek. So just a couple quick things on the character, right? So we listened loud and clear to both some of the neighbor comments as well as the board comments on developing the character of the house. We really took a good long look, liking the texture, a lot of the texture of some of the alley forms in town, and as well as paying homage to the original design of the house was largely the existing log house. It's based on the texture of the logs, the texture of the window trim and that type of thing. So we took that to heart and really looked at adding a number of areas of visual texture to the house. both in this, as I mentioned before, the siding on the gable ends has quite a bit of batten relief to it to sort of take those alley textures in a way, but clean them up, trim them up, make them appropriate for a residential development. And in that, incorporating our eave detail that we mentioned, it's a current interpretation of an eave, not historic. And as well, the rake of the roof, that textured siding really helps that rake of the roof read, I think, as an interesting detail. And like I mentioned, also the window detail that we see in the center of the right image, that's a steel relief trim to add some depth and texture to the windows. Then there was a lot of focus as we were coordinating with Jana on making sure the solar panels do not meet the ridge. So it's more of a traditional ridge cap that is 9 inches above the existing ridge of the house, or the primary ridge of the house, to help add that difference in fly line and tuck the solar panels intentionally into the ridge cap. So this is just a comparison of preliminary design on the left and then refined design on the right. And we can see sort of that hollow in the center we think is feeling very successful in creating some interest and intrigue for that portion of the home. A couple other pieces to work through quickly. Staff memo, some of the proposed conditions that Jana had introduced. Stone, right? The concept is 2 types of stone of the house, basically from the main level of the house down is the smaller coursed stone, more reminiscent of smaller assembled pieces of stone. And then as we get above that, there's some larger format version of the same stone is the intention.
Is that all granite?
That is it's a gray. We don't have an exact species as of yet. Mark,
right.
The wall distinction, and if we read Jana, your memo correctly, I think what we included on the right was clarification that our wood siding is lifted up off the ground. So we've incorporated a 9-inch band of metal at the base so that that wood siding doesn't meet the ground. Should we dive into lighting now, or do we want to leave it there and have discussion on those points so far, or should we keep going through lighting?
Well, tell us what you're going to do on number 4 to comply.
Sure. So number 4, we were the light fixture on the left, right, was previously a wall sconce, and we're committing to a step light there. Looking for board input on the 2 reset fixtures, the downlights and the soffit. I think those certainly could move to wall sconces. I think a step light in that location with 2 doors entering that deck may not produce enough lumens. So look for board input.
Can lights as well. Oops. It's just about the proper wattage.
Okay, so I think condition 5 was about the wattage of the light. I think we have very, very specific control over the lamps that go into these lights, so we comply with that.
Is that 24 watts on the bridge and the area, the open area around the creek, or less? 24 or less?
Correct.
It is. All right. Thank you.
And then I think there was a specific mention of the garage light. So right now we do have 1 downlight in the soffit above the garage doors. And I think that's a code requirement at a door. So we could look at sconce there if that feels more appropriate, but keeping to the single light source is our intention. Condition 7 and 8, I think the solar panels and non-reflective roofing covered.
No issues on these.
And then 9, 10, and 11, I think all made sense to us as far as confirming that.
Lastly, I think we talked about this a little bit.
Yeah.
Commitment to salvaging as much as possible.
Correct. And so I think the letter on the right was from Paul Ricks on sort of a deconstruction plan for the home and donation. So again, agreeing with condition 12.
Okay,
That's what we got.
okay, questions, Rally?
Could we see the comparison of the preliminary and the final for the east elevation again, please?
Yep. Give us a moment. We're getting there.
So the deck that's shown on the preliminary between the two masses is no longer there. It's been moved further into the building. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the deck previously extended further to the left to where
Yes.
the cursor is now, and that has pulled back to the right to where the cursor on the right image.
Okay, so
That's-
it's just over that, for lack of a better term, the connection between the two masses.
Correct,
Correct.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, Mark.
Yep, go ahead, Matt.
Chris or Alex, could you give us a measurement of the existing long roof ridge?
We're working on that.
We're pulling that up for you.
We can move on to other questions while they're pulling that up.
Well, that was gonna be mine.
Okay. Let me get you that info. Right.
I mean, the old condition number 9 said, you know, to look at eaves, overhangs, and they've adjusted some things on the walls, and the eaves are contemporary, but there are some. But breaking up the ridge line, they just didn't, I don't think they did. And so I'm just curious what still could be done. I'm still troubled by that 75-foot mass.
So our intent, you are correct, Mark, the ridge is 75 feet. Our intent was to, by stepping the ridge cap and tucking the solar panels in, to break that down into, you know, what is the 26-foot ridge on the left and the 40-foot ridge on the right.
I'd like the board's opinion on whether just separate, putting some panels up there is really breaking up the ridge line. I don't know. I'd be interested in other people's opinion, but Matt, did you have another follow-up on that, or?
I was just curious what the length of the existing roof is. It's quite long. So I'm curious if they're proposing a roof length regardless of the caps and the solar panels, if it's similar to what exists there today or if it's different.
Great question, Matt. We can dig in the background here and try to get a length on the existing ridge today. Sorry, we don't have that.
But on the new design, it's still 75 feet. So I don't know. While they're hunting that down, let's take other questions, though, as Matt suggested. It's a good idea just to keep it going.
Could you, Bob here, could you address the, on number 9, the modifying the south building facade in the south building to become more traditional versus the cantilevered window? Is that, I'm assuming that's the large window that's on the west side of that building. It looks like it has been changed somewhat, but isn't it still a cornerless window, for lack of a better term?
Yes, great point. Sorry, we glazed over. So yes, previously a preliminary with what's on the screen, this was a true cantilevered corner with the structure hidden inside. And the intention was just to add add that, ground that cantilever so that it has a structural column beneath it so that it doesn't feel cantilevering anymore. It's got more structural logic than structural heroic.
And the glass has been pulled in slightly. Looks like there's a white element in between the column and the glass. So the glass
Yeah.
is pulled in further as well.
Correct. The glass was pulled to the right 30 inches. And this is what we're seeing there in the white is actually the sun hitting the fireplace mask beyond. And we can look for a better corner view of that element to help describe that.
Or if you could zoom in on that right side on the today's version, maybe that would help us
Sure.
a little bit. We have it in front of us in the packet, but still.
Yep.
There you go. That helps a little bit. Yeah. So Bob, there's some relief in receding, but that little column on the left, that's what was added new to give it a piece of structure, I guess.
Right, and push the glass back.
Correct.
Push the glass to the east.
Yes. Came to the right.
Mm.
And you did say, or I'm sorry, the landscape architect, I don't recall her name, said that the driveway actually increased, the driveway and parking area actually increased from what was shown in the.
About 10 square feet, she said. About.
And what the reason for that?
If we go back to the turning radii of as we look at that diagram, this was a deeper dive with civil engineers to understand the turning motions of the cars and the vehicular turning. So while we hear you loud and clear on wanting to reduce that, these were sort of our tests to make sure we were right sizing it and keeping it as minimal but functional as possible. Did I do it? Okay job, Sherry. All right. So in checking the existing ridge length, going back to Matt's question, we're at 82'9" is the existing ridge length of the home today.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. If there are no other questions, let's hear from the public. Excuse me. So if you would electronically raise your hand, if you would like to comment, now's the time. And I'm not seeing any. Piper, I don't see anybody, do you?
I don't.
Okay. All right, well then, seeing no public comment. Thanks to the applicant, we'll go ahead and start deliberations. And as always on 1 through 12, if you agree with all those, just let us know. And if you have any new ones, throw them on the table. So who would like to start?
Mark, I'll go ahead and start. I think last November when this project was heard, it was either my first real meeting, maybe there was one other special meeting before, but so this was sort of my baptism into HARC other than being an applicant. I do want to just quickly kind of respond to the original condition 9, which I think mostly really, it did relate to the cantilever or the perceived cantilever at the southwest window, but it also, I think myself and maybe another board member too are trying to wrap our heads around, the zeroed out eave. And at the time I was sort of clinging to the policy number 22 roof form, which speaks to using roof forms that are found traditionally in the in the established historic fabric of town. Clearly, as we all know from being in town here, eaves are traditional. But I think since then, in the past year, and all the projects I've seen come through HARC since then, I think eaves speak more to architectural detailing, which is covered under policy 24, and I'll just read it real quickly. Or a section of it. It says, as a matter of recommended policy, architectural details that suggest building styles found historically in Telluride are discouraged in this area in order to help maintain a clear definition of the edge of the historic district. So there's a clear sort of contradiction there. I've softened on that number 9 considerably since then, I think. Anyway, so that's my response to that part of the conversation we've had. Just going through the rest of the kind of the list here, I also am somewhat uneasy about the 75-foot ridge length, especially since, you know, it's parallel to Dakota, meaning it runs east-west and not north-south with sort of the Aspen or whatever, the streets that come up the hill. I think though, however, that's a byproduct of another goal, and that goal is moving as far away as possible from Cornet Creek. As the applicant has demonstrated, that, you know, gives them a somewhat triangular building area. And it really sort of pushes, you know, into that configuration. Like you said, Mark, I think originally there were some skylights up there that attempted to break the eave visually, which we took issue with. and now they're trying to achieve the same thing with the breaking up of the skylights. Like, I guess I'll just leave it there. I'm 75 feet of ridge length is a lot still. I think the 9 inches of relief from the wood siding down to the ground is not sufficient functionally enough. The purpose there is to be able to withstand several feet of snow that may be up against the side of the building. Perhaps my biggest issue though are the window sizes, especially in the south elevation. Just as an attempt to remain objective, I believe you all have an 8 foot by 10 foot or a 10 foot by 8 foot garage door. That's 80 square feet. That's easy math. Immediately above that, the south room of the living room, that window is 108 square feet. The window to the right of that, the kitchen, south of the kitchen, is 136 square feet. The east side, the living room window facing east, is 129 square feet, and even the master bedroom window is 63 square feet. I think policy 27A, which I'll read because it's short, large expanses or clusters of windows are inappropriate. I think windows that are larger than a 10 foot by 8 foot garage door are large. I don't know how to be more objective than that. I think they need to be either broken up into more traditional arrangements, which is what 27C says. The placement of grouping windows should be similar to that seen historically. Also, I think windows historically were not set on the floor. I think that's part of the issue. Floor to ceiling glazing is not a traditional arrangement. The last item I'll comment on is I'm not as concerned about the driveway. I think like the applicant has demonstrated, the driveway has to be functional. Part of the function of moving the house as far away from Cornet Creek is it's on the north side of the lot. You have to be able to get from Dakota to the house. The area is a function of that equation. That's all I got.
I'd have to support you on everything you've said. I think the windows definitely need to be reduced. I think that number 2, the distinction between the foundation and walls. I'm struggling with the breaking up of the long roof. I don't know. I can't think of a way to do it that would make sense and still work with the design that they've got. Whether it's I don't know what the answer to that is. The driveway, seeing the diagram, clearly indicates that it meets it's the only way you're going to get in and out of there without backing up 10 times to use that. I want to speak to the stone number one. Typically in town, a lot of the homes now that are under construction at the moment, are white or black with a gray stone. This appears to be more white, even more white than the gray that we've seen in town. And I think that something even in that gray tone would be more appropriate here than the pure white. If I'm not mistaken, but from what I could see, it looks like it's a really white stone. That's all I have.
Okay, Bob, thanks. Any other comments or consensus on John's 1 through 12 and any additional ones? Sounds like we have some thoughts about revising I'm taking notes here on number 3 to significantly reduce the glazing and or break up north and south windows, but and then maybe addressing the 75-foot ridge. But anybody else want to comment or have any new conditions?
Mark, I'll comment on the roof ridge. I'm actually kind of curious what you think about it. I would normally agree that it should be broken up more. The ridge cap does provide a little bit of granular change, but I'm not sure if it's enough. The thing that it's giving me pause is if the existing roof is about 82 or 83 feet long, if that should give a little leniency to a shorter roof that they're proposing.
My belief is the context of neighborhood is not comparing what was there, although the overall mass and scale is less than what's there, but that was a one-off unique that, as John has said, would never be approved today. But I think it's context neighborhood, and I think that there should be a condition that says either break up or reduce. I know how to break it up, but I wouldn't pin them down. I'd give them some flexibility or reduce the length. At 75 feet, I agree with Stacy. It's just too long, and I think we should compare it to the neighborhood, even though it's not abutting directly inside of the historic district. I think it's just too long. I believe that the guidelines previously cited on our old number 9 speak to that. Each 1 and 2, or roof form 22 actually. And others weigh in. Anybody else? Where do you think, do we have a consensus that we should say either break up and or reduce the ridge length or the roof line, I should say? Is anybody else got a feeling on that? I think we're all looking at the guidelines here, and it says, I think it's just a context of neighborhood thing.
Yeah, Mark, I can weigh in a little bit here if you want.
Yes.
I agree that it's supportable to include a condition on that. I'm not 100% sold that it's altogether necessary. I don't know. Maybe I was fooled by the solar panels breaking up, having the appearance of breaking up the ridgeline a little bit, but maybe I'm a rube. I don't know. If you wanted to include something that way, it's supportable for sure.
Okay, Kieran, you agree with John's number 2 to strengthen, or number 3 to strengthen that reduction of fenestration there? And stronger.
Number 3.
Yeah. Number 3.
Number 3. I mean, reading John's rationale and her analysis, I think spells it out pretty clearly.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you want to add additional language, that's fine. How necessary it is.
Stacy, yeah, I think we should be more specific on that one, significantly reduce and or break up. As Stacy, you shared your thoughts about even breaking up, having some spaces between some of those window dividers or something. But truly still reduction. If Casey, could you come up with some language there that actually is for what you spoke to on number 3?
Well, I don't want to, I mean, sure, but I don't want to get prescriptive. I mean, there's multiple ways it could be done, right? If there were a solid panel, effectively let's say a 30-inch solid panel at the floor, they could still keep the window frame, for the, to keep the fenestration pattern. That would reduce the glazing area. I mean, that'd be, there's half a dozen ways we could throw out there that they could accomplish the goal, but I don't want to prescribe.
Could we say revise and significantly reduce the north and south windows to be consistent with TH 27A and C?
I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm
How
more
they do it is
concerned.
up to them.
I'm not as concerned with that north side. I mean, the area there is also substantial, but
Yeah.
the main concern here is light spill down into town, and the north side's not going to do that unless you're hiking full moon hike up the Weeby maybe, but
Just hope they don't get a big rock.
well,
Yeah.
there's gonna be rockfall mitigation for sure. But
For 3 feet.
for me, it's all about it's that living room.
Yeah.
Southwest corner.
Would you eliminate the north then?
As a condition.
Yeah.
It depends on how aggressive they are on the south side, I guess.
I'd leave them both in there for now. And,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I would
I,
agree with it.
I mean, I think this is approvable as long as we can be, this is final, this is it. To help Jonna be able to approve whatever they revise here. So I'd leave them both in there, and I think she's heard us, the applicants heard us. But Bob, I like your language, revise and significantly reduce north and south windows. That's a good thought. And then I would like to, at least 4 people seem to support the reduce and or break up the 75-foot ridge and not tell them how to do it. But I think it has to be done. It's just, it was in our original condition, and I think and actually we could add policy 22A roof forms, 22A roof forms, that old number 9. Anyway.
Excuse me, Mr. Mark, if it's okay, Gideon would like to make a comment. I know it's a little unorthodox, but our client Gideon Berger would, if that's appropriate.
Well, we did have the owner or the applicant presentation, then we had public comment. I may have to open up public comment again, but if it's something different that's not been spoken to, we'll go ahead and allow it real quick here.
Okay, if the clerk could allow Gideon to comment, that would be great. Thank you.
I will as soon as I find him on this list.
Thank you, Piper.
2A.
Missing it. Is it Cassandra Barker?
Yeah, it could be under Cassandra if Gideon's
There we
not
go.
separate. Yes, it's probably under Cassandra.
Yeah, it's both of us. Thank you. Mark, thank you. I didn't have any comments. My comments are in response to the deliberation, so I'm sorry I didn't make them prior to this, but I had no cause to. I don't think that everyone in the HARC committee has been involved with the HARC committee since the inception of this project. We started with a very, very different project with ridge lines that looked very different and many fewer constraints geographically. When we came and asked HARC to move lot lines, we own the lots to the west of this house, and we didn't want to have a bigger lot. We wanted to just shift our lot so we could be further from Cornet Creek, and so we would have more latitude to build different shapes and different stuff. That was rejected by HARC, and now we have a lot that the combination of Cornet Creek and the lot lines are quite restrictive. And so, you know, at some point, and furthermore, we currently have an 83-foot ridge, and we have a huge window, much bigger than anything shown here in our house. And to the extent we can't honestly build a house, I mean, this is going to cost us a fortune. And if we can't build the house that we want to build, honestly, we're going to leave the house that is there now, and it's going to have all of the issues that it has. You know, we're improving 95 things as it relates to Coronet Creek, as it relates to height limitations, as it relates to volume limitations, as it relates to better taking care of the whole ecosystem there. I mean, I really feel like over the last 4 or 5 years, we've bent over backwards, iteration after iteration, each of which costs us $50,000, $100,000 to come back to HARC and get new arborists to come in and new civil engineers to come in and address these things over and over again. And honestly, it's frustrating. And if this is the way it takes to get houses built in Telluride, it really just leaves a bad taste. I'm just telling you, as from a personal perspective, in people's in my mouth, and I'm sure other folks' mouths. The notion that it takes 5 years and you can't get your house approved after getting comment after comment and trying to be responsive is honestly ridiculous. And I'm personally at the point of rethinking this whole project. And you can decide if you prefer what's there now to what we're proposing, which is, carbon neutral, distant from Coronet Creek, conforming home, or you prefer what you have now. And I understand the perspective that a new build needs to be evaluated on its own merits, not relative to what's there. But I'm just trying to be honest with you about the realities of the situation and where our heads are as owners. So I'll stop there, and I apologize. I took a lot more time than I'm sure.
All right, thank you. And we understand your concern, and it's very close to approval now. So we'll go back to deliberation. I've got to ask and see if there's any other public comment. So are there any public comments? If so, raise your hand electronically. And if not, we'll finish our deliberations and make a motion here. So again, we last heard this in November of 21. I'm not sure what the delays were in getting to us, but we're here now. And as I said, I think we agree it's approvable. I think we need to strengthen number 3. I think we need to add a number 13. And again, there's nothing revolutionary about breaking up the ridge and or reducing it and be consistent with past rulings. That's one thing we take seriously, and we have asked for ridges to be broken up time and time and time again. So it's very consistent. So does somebody want to try a motion?
I'll try a motion, Mark.
Okay, Matt.
I move to approve the proposed final large-scale new construction at 459 West Dakota Avenue, lots 3, 5R, and 8, Block 6, Dakota Edition, based on the findings in the staff memo dated October 19th, 2022, with the following conditions. I'm going to try this 1 through 12 as stated, and I will open up for friendly amendments to address number 3 and the roof ridge. This motion is based on evidence and testimony provided at a public hearing held on October 19th, 2022, with notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code. Revised plans incorporating conditions of approval shall be submitted within 60 days of this approval, or this approval becomes null and void unless otherwise indicated. That revised drawings submitted for a certificate of appropriateness must be a complete set with any changes to the drawings caught and labeled. Any changes to the drawings beyond the conditions of approval may result in more than one submittal being required.
Kieran will second.
I would
Okay, we have
propose a friendly amendment to number 3 to say revise and significantly reduce the north and south windows to be consistent with TH number 27A and C.
I will accept.
I will accept as well.
I'd like to offer a friendly amendment number 13, reduce or break up the 75-foot ridge line per 22A roof forms.
TH 22A.
Yeah, TH 22. Thank you, Karen.
Matt will accept.
I'll accept as well.
Okay, are we finished? Kieran?
Kieran, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Matt, yes.
Bob, yes.
Andrew,
And Mark,
yes.
Andrew, thank you.
I was waiting to do it this time.
All right, thank you all, and good luck to the applicant.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay. Our next project is the lot 400 West Pacific. Consideration of final large scale addition to an existing building in the accommodations 1 zone district, which will increase the structure's floor area by more than 25% and result in a building which will contain more than 2,500 square foot of floor area per land use code 72038-3. It's lot 40, block 6, West Telluride Edition at 400 West Pacific. Zone district is accommodations 1. Owner Dennis Gagan and McCarthy Family Properties, A Colorado LLC. Our applicant Fuse Architecture, Peter Lundeen, staff member Erica Jensen. Erica.
Thank you. All right, this is the final large scale review at 400 West Pacific. Preliminary review was seen and approved at the June HARC meeting. It is in the historic residential zone district and the historic residential treatment area. It is located inside the historic district, and there are many rated structures in the vicinity. The project description is the new construction of about a 1,500 square foot addition to the contributing house. And next we'll go through the conditions of preliminary approval from the June meeting. Condition 1 was to provide a rehabilitation plan for the shed, including the treatment of historic materials illustrated on elevations consistent with the rehabilitation standards and shed rehabilitation guide, and a more detailed plan that has been provided that staff is happy with. Condition 2 was to provide greater stepping down to the historic shed and street. This condition has been retained. The overall height of the addition has been lowered, which does help with pedestrian scale and stepping down, but apart from the decks, there is no additional stepping down to the alley or historic shed. Condition 3 was to revise the mass and scale to be not greater than the existing ridge height of the existing structure and similar in mass and scale to historic structures found traditionally in the neighborhood. The ridge height on the addition is now the same height as the existing structure. Condition 4 was to install an approved protection device at the northeast corner of the historic shed. Protection device has been installed, has been indicated on the landscape plan. Condition 5 was to increase the pitch of the roof to a minimum of 7.512 to match the historic principal structure. The main roof pitch is now 7.512 and the shed dormers are 412. Condition 6 was to preserve and reuse the historic corrugated metal roofing on the shed. The historic shed roofing will be reused and only replaced in sections if the historic material is beyond repair. New proposed conditions. Condition 1 is to revise the windows on the west elevation to be more of a traditional number and placement. The guidelines speak to placement and grouping of windows being similar to what was seen historically, and the west elevation, it seems that the placement and grouping is rather untraditional, especially when compared to the historic house. Condition 3 is to reduce the number of dormers, particularly on the east elevation. Dormers should be limited in size and number. The addition does have 5 dormers with 3 on the highly visible east elevation. Condition 2 was retained, which is to provide greater stepping down to the historic shed, alley, and street. And condition 4 is that the architect and contractor will meet on site with staff prior to the issuance of a building permit to discuss the shed rehabilitation plan. And I'm happy to answer any questions before we hear from the applicant.
Okay, questions for Erica?
I've got a question, Erica. Could you elaborate a little bit on number 2 as far as stepping down the structure? I think I brought this up the last meeting. It seems to me that the new addition is 25 feet from the alley.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious if you could elaborate more about your concern about that. I could see the fact that it doesn't step down to the street, but the alley with the decks and with the massing of the shed seems to me to step down. So could you give some more color
I
on
think
that?
especially with the historic shed too, and it being besides from the decks being just a straight up wall, maybe stepping back that upper level just a little bit would just kind of help
step down instead of it being straight up. It is pushed fairly far back from the alley, but with the historic shed being there, I think a little more stepping down would be helpful.
Thank you.
Other questions? Eric, could you put up the west elevation on sheet A42, or let's see, doesn't even have it numbered. The west elevation. Okay, there you
yeah.
go. Well, yeah. So in your condition proposed question, when you say revise, let's see, the windows on the west elevation, more traditional number and placement. You're asking for a reduction, right? And when it's compared to the historic house, which has less than half the windows, you're asking for a reduction there, right?
A reduction or a more traditional grouping. I think you could leave that open to the applicant.
Except we're not gonna, if we approve it, we won't see it again, and we want to be able to give you, well, we'll have more deliberations about it. We want to give clear direction, that's for sure. That's my only question.
Well, Dennis and Gary are gonna present to you tonight, if you can unmute the paper.
Okay.
Right, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. This is Dennis Gagan. I'm the owner of the house for the last 20 years or so. I'm really thankful that we've finally gotten around to doing some work over there. But for the last 20 years, of course, my family and I have really enjoyed Telluride. My God. With that said, thank you again for your time and attention. Peter Lundeen, who's been working closely with me and Gary on the project, of course, is not only an architect, he's a Renaissance man. So he's at rehearsals tonight for The Sound of Music, which is a local Telluride performance. So Peter will not be with us tonight. However, Gary Anderson, who is also an architect and a very close friend of mine for many years, has been helping on the project, and he will assist tonight in Peter's absence. And Gary is also on his own town's historic committee back in Massachusetts, so he has an idea of how you guys are sitting there. So he brings some historic renovation experience. So that's about it. And as you know, there's a proposed motion to approve the project with 4 conditions, and Gary will take a few minutes to address those concerns with you. And again, thank you for your review of the project again this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, Gary, go ahead. Gary, can you share your screen? Do you see him?
I don't see Gary Anderson part of the meeting.
He's not joined yet?
Yeah, I don't.
He's on. No, maybe he has to be unmuted.
I don't see him on the meeting at all.
Yeah, I'm looking. I don't see him listed as a participant here. There's no Gary.
That's interesting. He's been watching. We've been talking on the phone, and he's been watching.
Maybe under another name.
Different name.
I have
Gary.
a Hal Rosenfield. Bruce Wright.
Oh, this
No.
Sam
is,
Siegel.
hold on 1 second. I'll call him on my cell phone here and see if I can reach him. I was just talking to him a second ago. So sorry for the delay.
Yeah, maybe he was watching on YouTube.
It could be.
But I mean, not connected. I don't know.
Yeah. Let's see.
There's nobody on.
Hey, Gary, can you hear me?
How about AI?
Hello, Gary.
No, I. Is it AI or else?
AI, yes, that's him.
Can you find AI on there?
Can you find AI on the program anywhere?
There's no AI.
So GT, I'm watching it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm watching.
Well, he's watching it on YouTube, maybe. He needs to connect.
The link to sign in.
Yeah,
Can you?
Gary, they think you might be on YouTube instead of the link with them.
I just clicked the link. It says Zoom.
Okay.
Oh, Piper, can you help him out? The new protocol, maybe that's the problem.
I am not acquainted with the new Zoom function. All I know is that when we signed on tonight, you registered for the meeting and then you got a link in your email. So, but you shouldn't be watching unless unless we see you as a participant.
Can you help him out? The new protocol, maybe that's the problem.
He's watching on YouTube. There's no delay.
The delay. Yep.
All I know is that when we signed on tonight, you registered for the meeting and then you got a link in your email. So.
Hey, Dennis.
Yes.
Gary's watching via YouTube, so he can't participate in the meeting, so we need him to join via the Zoom link.
Right, I understand what you're saying. Okay, should I ask Gary? I have him on the cell phone. Should I ask him to go off and reboot, like, and re-come on?
Yeah, why don't we try that?
Yeah.
Hey, Gary, just once you click off and try to reboot, go through the whole process again, okay? They'll wait for you.
Doesn't need to restart.
Just reboot.
Need to restart.
Okay,
Oh, no,
so
no.
come off and sign in again.
Same thing.
Okay, I'll just click the link you sent. Okay.
Okay, they're gonna try to do that. Sorry for the delay. If we delay much longer, maybe Peter Lundin will be done with rehearsals. I'm sorry.
Yeah, did he have the same link you did?
I think he did. I mean, Peter and I were on with him earlier today, and we explained to him how to sign up and how to, hit the button on your town historic meeting, and this is how you register. And I said, Gary, I'm all set. And so I thought
It says I've registered.
it says you registered, Gary? Okay.
Now, there's the video.
It says he's registered as GT Anderson
Zoom.
on Zoom. Okay.
I don't see him. He's not connected here. Huh.
All right.
Mhm.
All right, let's see.
Well,
let's see. I can,
Dennis.
Mark, I can speak to some of the issues. I'll just.
Well, there's another option. If he could try to keep connecting, we could go on to the next project. It's a little unorthodox, but I hate if you're relying on him, I hate not to.
No.
No, we can't do that.
We're not going to do that.
No.
All right, you're on.
But, Dennis could hold the phone up and Gary could talk to us.
Oh, here, Piper, I just got an invitation.
Oh.
Zoom launch meeting.
Okay, we're going to have Gary.
Oh, I see Gary.
Recording in progress.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, there he is. All right, tell him to unmute. Dennis, tell him to unmute.
I have.
Sorry about that. Thank you for your patience.
So you want to speak to the 4 conditions? As Dennis outlined?
Yeah, we used enough time. And I'm sorry Peter can't be here. It's a real job to step into his lederhosen, but I'll do my best here. I'm going to start with condition number 1, the west elevation. And for the west elevation, sorry, this is skipping back and forth. the historic house has 8 window types. The new house doesn't want to ape, the new addition doesn't want to ape from the old house. It has 6 window types, but it's from a different time. 400 front, I've been there many times. It's a lovely house, but it's dark. The windows were grouped for bathroom or over a kitchen counter or for a bedroom or for a dormer. The same on the rear elevation of this building that we've reconfigured a number of times, especially with the roof coming down so much. These are bathrooms and the windows are squeezed between a shower and a water closet. The key windows here are for the central stair, and the intention is to do something that 406 can't do, which is to welcome light, welcome passive daylight and ventilation into the core of the house. We live in a contemporary house. We're used to not burning a lot of light, and we really welcome daylight. The rest of the windows are just arranged over a kitchen sink, straddling a mantle in this room and in that room. They're functionally oriented, much like the windows in a barn would be. And so that kind of explains the rationale of it. A view that I feel it's not an excuse, but it's, the other thing is we didn't want windows that just stared into walls of an adjacent building. So if the windows were high, such as the windows above the bookshelves near the mantle, they're intended to look up over the barn that's nearby, admit afternoon sunlight into parts of a house that could be dark. And for the impact of it, this is the 3D model of the view from the alley. This is the
Are you sharing your screen? Because we can't see your presentation if you are.
Oh, come on, really? You're kidding. So you're not on.
So did you hit share screen and it didn't work, or?
Get back to Zoom. Yeah, hang on one moment. Jeez. I'm terribly sorry about this.
There should be a share screen button. There
Okay.
you go. You got it.
There you go, Gary. All
Okay,
right.
so you heard my whole dribble about the placement of the windows.
Yeah.
So I won't go over that again. I view them as windows that have been put into a barn where they should be, where they need to be. There are fewer window types. There's slightly different proportions because we want to bring as much light and natural air into the guts of the house as possible. And to speed along back to where I thought I was showing you, this is a view of what you see from the public way. This is the barn at 406 that Dennis and I know very well, having been in and cleaned it out and discovered old motorcycles there. The view from the alley. It's a close-up view from the alley. And just a little bit later in the presentation, excuse me, I want to mention this barn is important. This barn is an intermediate scale element that is proud, it's honest, and it's visible from Aspen Street. And it creates almost a three-dimensional, well, it's a screen to the west side of the house, but it's also a three-dimensional composition element between the addition, the shed, the alley. So that's my comment on the west elevation. Do you have any questions before I go on to the next?
No questions.
Okay, I realize time is precious. So what I'd like to do, just to have an ordered presentation if possible, I'd like to go on to the dormer condition. And what I'll do is you might not have seen these renderings, but I think this is a pretty good view. Something that a lot of people will see when they walk from downtown. We lowered the roof a lot. I mean, it wasn't easy, but the roof has been lowered over 4 foot 8.5 inches from the first time that you were kind enough to review it. We've lowered it to align with the ridge of the existing house by dropping 2 foot 7 5/8 inches. And we increased the slope of the roof to match that of 400 front. Dormers protrude in order to get any kind of usable space with almost knee walls at the side. So what we tried to do was do dormers that were simple, historic, simple horizontal shapes, very honest, not do a gable shape, which raised an emphasis of verticality, but try to do something that played well with the existing house. And once again, the great thing about the orientation of this house is east and west, but east isn't great if you can't get morning sun. So the 2 dormers are for the bedrooms. The center dormer is to bring ventilation and light passively into the house and make it pleasant in the morning, and ideally to be a little perch for a window seat or a work at home desk. And this was in your packet, I believe, but it kind of illustrates what we had before, which was squeezing a roof down on top of the windows to pulling the roof eaves very low and to make the dormers as low and that they spring from below the ridge line as possible. And then do you have any questions about the dormers?
No.
Okay, the dormers kind of work well with the awning roof over the entrance, which kind of cascades down to Aspen Street. And then I'd like to go back to condition number 2, please, which is to step down. And I think it's important that people kind of understand where Dennis's house is. This is the streetscape along Pacific. Dennis's house is a notable house. Both of them are. They're very low compared to historic houses, newer houses. They're very, very low, and to houses that are taller above the way. Going north-south down Aspen, there are the houses beyond, which are outlined here. I regret that we didn't have the outline of the barn, which is there, but is lovely. And it scallops down, it valleys down between the Victorian Inn and the newer development that's to the south at the alley. And when you look at the setbacks at the south, and you look at the view angle, that's like an 80-degree view angle with nothing, with no pedestrian scale, with a deck looming up. And I realize it's in a different district, but it's there, it's across the alley. It throws shadows consistently across the alley. We have a historic shed that's interesting and dignified and maintaining its presence. We have moved 25 feet away from the property line, and we're at a 1-to-1 view angle up to the ridge. We're at much less than that when you get to 20 feet 4, I think, at the eaves. And there's kind of a nice scalloping, a nice stepping down from ridge to eave of dormer to eave of roof, and then the cascading balconies, which, as I understand in the guidelines, are encouraged, and then a barn beyond. And then finally, the alleyscape, historic house, newer houses, historic barn, shed, this building. Here are the newer houses on Pacific Street. Here are their additions. This ridge is lower than the additions that have stepped down and are closer to the alley in the new houses. And it's far lower than what is directly across the street on Aspen. So I understand it's a different area, but it's also a real area. And the house has to fit in and play a part in that, I'd like it to fit in and play a part in that. And just one couple more images just to refresh people's memory about this, which these are built conditions. These are the two houses that are directly, here's the barn, shed over here. These are the two additions that are taller than what we are requesting. This is further down the alley, which is closer, taller yet. Whoops, sorry. And another example, closer to the alley and taller. You all know these buildings, Peter worked on them. These are across Aspen Street. The addition overlaps something like this that I'll show you in the aerial photograph. And then the bigger buildings that escalate down to the hotel with the many roof forms along. And then this is the south side of the street that we don't know what's going to go in the southeast open lot directly behind, but this is what's along the street, which it's stepping down to the street, but it's not giving any elbow room. You have to crane your neck to see up. And then just as one final comparison, this is the plan overlaid in the historic district. This is what's surrounding it. These are the two houses I showed that are closer to the alley and taller, that don't have the benefit of a shed in front, don't have the benefit of a historic barn out to the property line. These are the houses that directly abut to the south. This is an older photograph, so it's not filled in. And then these are the houses that step down to the alley at the property line, but with full height here, which is midway through the setback of our house. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. We've passionately worked on this. Dennis has been a dear friend, adventurer and patron for many years, and we're trying to do the best we possibly can for him. So if you have any questions, I'd be pleased to answer.
Okay, thank you. And so what questions do we have for Gary, if any, or Dennis? Anybody have any questions? No questions. All right, let's thank you, Gary. Let's hear from the public. Any public comments? There's still some public with us. I guess not about this project. So, all right, with that, we'll begin deliberations. As always, is there a consensus with Erica's items, conditions 1 through 4? If not, speak to it. And if there are any additional ones, this is a recommended vote for final approval here.
I would, I'm sorry, Mark.
Nope. Go ahead.
Number 2 and number 3. I'm having difficulty when you look at this bill. I did see the video, and I know this has gone through a number of iterations, and each one seemed to improve it. And I know Stacy mentioned in the last meeting that they addressed certain issues and created other issues with it as they proceeded. This, I'll take the first one. I don't know how you could step this building any more than it is. It's pretty tiny, and you have the decks, you have the space between the sheds. So I can't see stepping it down anymore.
Do you recall we went on a bus tour some years ago? You were on it.
Yeah.
And we stopped at it's a greenhouse. I think it's on, might be Alder and Galena. And it has a garage and then 2 floors above it, all on the same plane
Mhm.
with a deck. And I remember clearly that the interpretation at the time was that the deck doesn't necessarily break up that vertical plane of 3 floors.
Mhm.
This is the same condition.
The same condition. But I think you've got tremendous amount of space between
Okay.
being
that's the
further away
difference.
from the alley than most buildings, and particularly everything around this house. I think that I just don't know how you do it. When you look at the section, and I know it's not our purview to worry about heights inside spaces and stuff, but there's nothing in there. I mean,
Well,
it's-
I have to imagine a little, right? But I'm guessing that there's a desire to keep some off alley parking, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. The irony here is if they brought the lower level out, that would achieve the goal of stepping down, right? I mean, it's not what we want. It's the inverse of what we want.
They're
but-
maxed out on site coverage.
And they're maxed
They're
out
to
on
the
site
T.
coverage. But if they move further away from the main house, let's say, anyway.
You'd have
it-
one parking space.
It's less about how, we're not necessarily trying to shove the upper floors back or reduce or subtract. It's just right now a 3-story plane, I think was all I'm doing is reiterating the discussions we had the last time. We may decide that the 2 decks, the way they are, where the upper one is narrower than the lower, is sufficient. That could be a rationale. Or just the overall distance from the alley, a 1-to-1 view angle could also be sufficient for me, I guess. The comparison to the other side of the alley doesn't do me any good. Sorry.
Yeah, I understand. I agree.
Bob, go ahead. You want to
I'm
talk
just
about
trying to
number
find
2?
a way that this could work, given the constraints of the site and I don't know. I guess we could send it back and tell them to take a look at it.
Well, look, we're having this is
Discussion.
So I think another way to look at it is set back far enough from the alley that is in and of itself a stepping
Mhm.
back. That could be it's a stepping.
Right. And I don't know if making it solid rail or something to make it look more of a mass.
Well, we had that discussion too, and that just tends to add mass. And at the time we were concerned with subordinate and keeping mass reduced. So yeah, we go back and forth on those railings all the time.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know where to go with that one. Let's see, number 1, reducing the windows on the west. I think the ones that are throwing this whole thing off are the ones that are at the stairs.
Well, that goes to the placement. It's
Yeah.
I understand trying to get light in here, but if you just put your finger over the top of those 2, it ain't so bad.
right. Well, and the way the one window intersects the material transition at the lower level.
Mhm. And they did make a significant change from before, where that was up at the same level as the corrugated metal of the main house. And I think that really helped a lot on both sides of the house from the previous. But that's not addressing the window yet. I think those 2 windows are the ones that are really difficult to accept.
Agreed.
And then the dormers, I don't know, I don't really have a problem with that. When you see this perspective down the street and look at what they're trying to do inside, I don't have an issue with it.
I'm not as concerned either, and this is my reasoning. We did, based on the idea of subordinates to the historic principle, push that ridge down, like the applicant said, substantially.
Yeah.
There, those still need to be, functional spaces, and the way to do that is with these shed dormers, and they're not gable dormers, they're shed dormers. They're as respectful as they could possibly be. I mean, reduce it to 2.
Take the one out of the middle of the stage.
Yeah, well. I mean, that would certainly do it, right?
Yep.
Reduce it to 2, done, check.
They could simply sort of mirror what they're doing on the.
Are we trying to design this project for
Well,
them?
I
Or are
mean,
we just
we-
gonna approve the 4 conditions and get on with it?
So. In light of Karen's comment, I could strike 2, leave 1, 3, and 4 in place and improve.
I would agree with that. I actually would, slight change. I think I would add a little bit more bite to number 1. I think the proportions of those windows are a little square, not quite as vertical. And then I would add to also reference RC 33C in addition to D. But I generally would agree with you, strike 2 and improve 3 and 4.
Mark would go along with that as long as you improve number 1. Or strengthen it. How about you, Karen?
I guess my preference is to do 1 through 4 as stated. Understanding that it's not just a stepping down to the alley that Eric was referencing, it's also stepping down to the historic shed, so.
And the street.
Yeah, and the street, but if I'm outvoted, I'm outvoted, but my preference would be to leave that in.
Well, the only thing that was swaying me, and maybe I'm not seeing it right, as I was listening to Stacy, was the 25-foot step back from that shed, if I understood that right, which is a pretty good gap.
I think in addition to that, Mark, they have brought the ridge down significantly since the last time we saw it. I think that to me is what kind of pushed me over the edge to agree that they don't need to step it, the actual massing down further.
Andrew, any thought on this topic of whether it's needs to be stepped down or if it's enough space that separates it compared to all the rest of the buildings we saw?
Well, I think just going back to Matt's point, reducing that ridge line significantly, having a large setback, it does break up quite a bit from the shed. And to be able to delineate from that top balcony to the lower one, I think can provide some. And if you're standing on the street there, kind of looking where the shed is, it looks like you're going to see more so above where the lower balcony is looking up to the top. So, I mean, I'm kind of in agreement with these guys on what Matt and Stacy were saying. They've really taken a lot into consideration here, going around, looking at the neighborhood, everything that surrounds them, trying to find a way to make it work while also maximizing their space.
Okay. Well, who wants to try to do a motion? We'll see if there's any.
I can try one. I move to approve the proposed final large-scale addition at 400 West Pacific, Block 6, Lot 40, West Tower addition based on the findings in the staff memo dated October 19th, 2022, and with the following conditions. Number 1, revise the windows on the west elevation to be of a more traditional number, placement, and proportions per RE number 9F and RC number 33C and D. Strike number 2. Number 3 and 4 as stated. This motion is based on evidence and testimony provided at a public hearing held on October 19th, 2022, with notice of such hearing. Provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code, revised plans incorporating the conditions of approval shall be submitted within 60 days of this approval, or this approval becomes null and void unless otherwise stated. The revised drawing submitted for a certificate of appropriateness must be a complete set with any changes to the drawings clouded and labeled. Any changes to drawings beyond the conditions of approval may result in more than one submittal being required.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second. Okay, Kieran, please vote.
Kieran, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Matt, yes.
Bob, yes.
Andrew, yes.
Mark, yes. All right. Thank you. Good luck, Dennis. And thank you, Gary.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, the next project is the Pine Street Perch. Consideration of a final large-scale new construction in the residential commercial zone district containing more than 2,500 square foot of floor area per land use code 7203A1. It's lot 1R, block 5. 121 North Pine Street is the address. It's in the residential commercial zone district. Owner is South Spruce Properties LLC. Applicant, One Architects, Bruce Wright, and staff member Jonna Wenzel. Jonna.
Mark, I'm going to recuse myself for proximity.
Okay, Matt. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Getting resettled. Okay, so this is the final large-scale review of 121 North Pine. The preliminary application was approved July 20th, 2022. As I'm sure you all remember, the site is located on the west side of Pine Street. It's inside the Telluride Historic Landmark District. On the map, it shows lots 1 and 3. Those lots were combined by a minor scale subdivision, creating lot 1R in December of 2020. It's in the residential commercial zone district and treatment area, but adjacent to both the historic residential and historic commercial zone district, and historic residential and Main Street treatment areas. There are a few designated historic properties on the block, seen the historic structures map. Currently on the site are a non-designated log cabin, which was built in 1938, and the non-historic storage barn, which was built in 1982. Both are to be demolished. The demolition was approved at the April 20th meeting, contingent on the approval of the final HARC application. So no further action is required to approve the demolition tonight. So on July 20th, HARC approved the preliminary application with 13 conditions. Condition number 1 was to further break up the massing along the south facade through stepping down to the west, providing relief in the wall planes and varying the materials from the east unit to the west unit. So the stepping down to the west, which is towards the rear alley, has not been significantly increased over time. It was slightly improved between the April and July proposals. It hasn't been significantly changed since July. The materials along the south facade between the units and the 2-car garage have been revised and have helped break up the massing. The garage module appears more as a large connector, which helps break up the massing, and the garages have been further set back from the alley with overhangs, which help the pedestrian scale. But this condition has been retained to still try to help step it down a little bit more to the rear, to the west. Condition number 2 is to revise the use of stone veneer to the foundation only. Previously, the entire first floor was stone veneer. That has been removed from most of the building except at the west unit, where it's wall cladding at the ground level. Condition number 3 was to revise the glazing in the deck doors off of the Box Canyon viewing room, which is here. They actually were windows at the last review. The windows have been revised to be more vertically oriented than previously, but are still quite out of proportion with those found traditionally. This is also a condition that I'll talk about in just a moment. Condition number 4 was to trim doors and windows with trim elements similar to that used traditionally. There's really minimal trim that is proposed except on the projecting windows on the north, south, and east elevations. So that condition has been retained. Show how drainage will be retained on site for final review is condition number 5. Dry wells are indicated on the revised plans. Condition number 6 was a demolition permit for the existing structure subject to approval of the final large scale redevelopment plan, which we're reviewing tonight. Condition number 7 was to offer the structure and materials for sale or salvage. That condition is retained as well. Add snow retention devices on the roof where appropriate is condition number 8. And they have provided snow fences where necessary. Condition number 9 was to add a semi-transparent material to the bottom of the stairs per the neighbor's request. Previously, the material aligned with the stairs. That area has been more enclosed in the revisions. Condition number 10 is to introduce gravel or pervious pavers to the alley rather than have continuous concrete. So they have proposed pavers along the alley and the driveway. Condition number 11 was to reduce the glazing on the east elevation on the first floors and the second floors within the gables. So here's a comparison of the east elevations from the previous review. They have reduced the glazing quite a bit, especially here in this south gable. They've also significantly reduced the windows in the gables. Condition number 12 was to make the windows be of vertical proportion on the north elevation. Again, previously, these were the windows of concern. Those have been made more vertical. Condition number 13 was to refine the materials and building form to enhance the pedestrian scale at the ground floor on the alley level at the southeast corner, which is sort of at the front or at the intersection of the alley and Pine Street. So the materials and form have been refined to provide greater pedestrian scale at the southeast corner. The stone has been removed from the wall and limited to the foundation. The deck railing has been refined, as has the porch. So proposed new conditions for final review. Again, I mentioned number 1, I have retained. I don't feel that the stepping down towards the west has been accomplished as HARC had discussed at the previous meeting. Condition number 2 is to reduce the southwest deck to be similar to those found traditionally and reduce the encroachments into the setback and southwest deck. I will say this deck has been significantly reduced. At the original review, it was at the property line. At the last review, it was reduced by about a foot. It still encroaches quite significantly into the setback, and at this corner are 2 rights of way, alleys on both sides, which I feel require that this encroachment be minimized or eliminated. Condition number 3 is to revise the south facade to be similar in scale and character to existing alley structures. Again, I think this relates back to the stepping down towards the rear and to the alley. This portion, I think, should be more similar in scale and character to alley structures. It's very residential. It has improved quite a bit in materials and treatment, but still doesn't feel like a traditional alley facade. Condition number 4 was to revise the projecting windows on the north and south elevations to have a traditional depth and trim. These windows were revised since the last proposal. I think this may be a reaction to the request to provide traditional trim, but is not traditional at all. Condition number 5 is to revise the 4x4 light above the 2-car garage on the south elevation to have a vertical emphasis and a simple arrangement. And condition number 6 was to revise or eliminate the small square windows in the gables on the east and south elevations. Again, this may be a reaction to the request to reduce the glazing, but these, I do not know what the purpose of these is and are obviously not traditional in size or arrangement. Condition number 7 is to reduce the size of the east-facing living room window to be of a traditional size and window to wall ratio. This window has been reduced. It was made more vertically oriented. The window sizes are still out of proportion to the window wall ratio and just to traditional window size. And then condition number 8 was to reduce the number of can lights on the front porch to avoid duplicating fixtures. I believe there are 6 can lights on the front porch and a sconce proposed. Condition number 9, again, was to trim doors and windows with trim elements similar to those used traditionally. That was retained from before. Provide a landscape plan and planting schedule with final CA plans. There is a landscape plan provided, but more specifics in a planting schedule would be helpful. And then 11, show the location of utilities. That was retained, and 12 and 13 were retained as well and have to do with the demolition. So I believe Bruce is with us from One Architects, and I'm happy to answer questions at this point.
Questions for Jonna? John, I have one. Your new conditions 1 and maintaining 1 and number 3 were those 2 the reasons that you thought we might want to see it again, and it could be optionally a continuance, and or if we stick with them, especially number 1, that's the hardest one to quantify here. Are you comfortable that if they do something to further step down, that you, without us being overly prescriptive, that you can pass judgment to comply there more than it does now on that west end?
Well, if it were to be approved tonight, you also will review the final CA plans with me. I think that HARC approved the preliminary application with that condition, assuming that, that you would see it again. And that, other than that, the massing scale had been improved. So I won't be reviewing this myself if it's approved. Or when it's
Okay, yeah. All right, well.
The question is for you as well, if you're comfortable in a more specific condition, perhaps.
Well, and if we're not comfortable, we could always send it back to the board, but it's just, I
would rather see it continued tonight than have it come forward with CA plans and then bring it back to the board. That's not.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's see where it goes. Any other questions of Jonna? If not, we'll go ahead and hear from the applicant. Bruce, if you want to share your screen.
Stop.
You guys hear me here?
Yes, sir.
Let's see here. I can share, let's see here. How are we doing this? Desktop one. Oh boy, this is going to be a big thing. I'm not prepared to share right now, and I don't know that we will. It's telling me to open some system preferences and whatnot here. John, I don't know if you want to bring up the submittal, and I'll just go through and respond to the most current conditions. Let's see here, starting with the top, number 1, revising the mass to step down to the west. We haven't stepped the height down. I feel like we've been concentrating our efforts on stepping down and breaking up the mass with what somebody called a connector, which it kind of is. So there's sort of the main house that's on the east. Then there's this connector piece that we kept massaging, and we kept pushing the garage plane back and the master bed back. We've changed the roof over the garage to make it more pedestrian friendly and create more, I would say, less wall space, more shadow lines. Same with the west unit, the one that didn't get shorter, but we're trying to make the pedestrian experience of it much more enjoyable at that level. And that kind of also blends over to the right in sort of what I was calling the fun, if not traditional box bay windows, only because there's a few of them in a row there. I think you've seen them around, not like that. I thought that was a playful interpretation of a new thing. But I would say it's tricky because we got slack because we needed to step the west or the east building down to the garage piece. And so we did that. You can't really see in this 2D dimension how flat that 412 is that goes back, but you really can't see it from the alley at all. And then to step down from that step down again, I think it's going to be hard. Right now, the massing on that west unit is very similar to what exists in the miners' storage units. And I know a lot of the referrals to, mimicking existing alley structures. Like right now, there's only like 3 lots that are in this situation, in this zoning. There's this one. There's one exactly directly to the west of us, which is the only other really developed one recently, and that was just done a year or 2 ago. And looking, and I don't have photos of that to present to you. I know that you guys are familiar with it, but if you look at that house, it's essentially similar to what we've got here. It reads as a 1-story plus a walkout because of that change in grade that goes on that north-south alley. And I thought that contextually it matched pretty good in terms of height and scale. Those guys have a deck on the southeast corner that measures about 10 by 20. And then this deck right now measures, it's just a hair smaller than that. We're at like 16 or 17 by, call it 11. And in walking the alley again, after getting Jonna's response, I actually sort of do agree with her. I think we can pull the deck back inside the setbacks. We like to push the decks outside only because it's open space. We kind of thought again that the deck in the southwest was going to open up the alley in a way that it's not right now. So contextually, we're actually making it better than the existing alley condition that we have presently. But relative to that deck scene and trucks making that corner, I tend to agree. So I'm not sure how much we would need to step that down more or detail it differently to achieve what Jonna would seem as reasonable. We might be able to get a foot, at the most a couple out of the ridge height, but I don't really think that's where the massing, the impact is. If you look at the other ways to reduce this massing, it's basically, wall planes and materials and some of these juxtapositions. And I honestly don't know if you could have any more different wall planes than we've got along this alley right now. If you guys look, there's probably a dozen different wall planes and more materials than we would typically have on a project. But I was going to rely on most of that to keep the massing down. So we'd be looking for a little more direction and specifically on what it would take to get you guys comfortable with that west unit, obviously in keeping it sort of livable and accessible. So number 2, the southwest deck, the condition, I just sort of spoke to that. We can reduce that. Number 3, revise the south facade. And I feel like we've been working on that consistently with you guys. I always get a little frustrated because the design guidelines say keep it different from historic traditional, and basically 10 out of 10 times you guys come back and say make it more traditional. Even when it says don't copy existing, and even when it says all the things, be creative, don't duplicate, make it compatible, all those things, that just gets a little old. And I'm not sure if you guys walk up and down this alley, just look to the left and see if we're using a precedent, those things are historic as well. I think we're sort of following along in the same design guideline. And as you can see here, we're progressing to try to suit your flavor. The projecting windows, I really like them on the south. They don't project out from the second floor. They actually project out to meet where the second floor is. And I really like the texture on it. The windows on the north are merely to provide some symmetry to the architecture. They're not critical. They don't look at anything important. They are probably going to be not translucent, probably. So I would request that you guys see that as a fun pedestrian-based element that is a new take on a traditional detail. When it comes to the window trim, we tried not to have window and door trim, but we've had, you know, other traditional materials and gables and shapes and all that stuff. If you tell us what your minimum size trim is, I think right now we've got a 2 or 3 inch shown that sort of matches that horizontal lap siding on the top floor. You guys are making us put it in, we'll put it in. Tell us what the smallest is that you'll accept. I don't think it's that far off. We've got the whole thing cased. The smaller square windows and the gables, you know, that was a couple things. That was one, reducing the overall glazing. You're not going to get too much view out of those high windows. 2, it was sort of a fun, unique element distinguishing this from a historic building. We could make those even small and skinny and make them vertically oriented. I think that'd be kind of fun. I thought on the inside of the house, it would be great to have sort of a beam of sunlight that came down where you can kind of track it. It's something to watch throughout the day. Who knows? You could stick your birthday on the wall where the sun hits it on your day of the year, something like that. Architecturally, I don't think this is going to confuse people or upset them, and hopefully it might be the opposite. The living room windows facing east, you know, I made them a little skinnier, and then we made them a little taller to make sure that they're vertical. We divided them into what would appear to be 4 vertical windows, even though it's only 2. I've seen this thing around, not in this specific district that we're in, but not far from it. Obviously, we will reduce that and play with you guys until we're happy with it. I don't see that as a hang up. And the rest of them are fine. Basically, the number of can lights, we can trim that down. The window and door trim, let us know what's going on. The landscape plan, detailing and schedules. And let's see here. Primarily, that's it. I've got a list of, you know, I was trying to come back at you with some guidelines, and I don't know that that would help, but there are lots of guidelines out there that ease up on some of the guidelines that make you guys want to make it more historic. 28D3, F, F1, F2, under the intro, 2A, 2A1, on the pedestrian scale, 8B, 8B1, 8C, 8D, 8E, architectural character, 28 intro, 28A, 28D3, 28E, E1, 28F, I already did those. And RC 30A3. I know you don't know all those things, but I'm just kind of trying to present that there's an option for you guys to not go the entirely historic copying route. Otherwise, I would love to gain confidence and know that we can work on this between whatever at the CA chair level. I'm confident we can. If you're scared that we can't, obviously, then you can't. Thank you.
Okay, questions for Bruce?
Bruce, I have a question for you. When I look at the progression from April to July to October, do you recall what was said or what condition was given or what discussion there was in April that caused you to eliminate the south-facing dormer on the eastern portion facing the alley? If I had to guess, I was at that meeting and I didn't go back and listen, but if I had to guess, I would think it was, we said something to the effect of provide a greater stepping down or reduce mouse scale in the alley or something along those lines. My reason, it's a rhetorical question, right? I think my biggest issue all along is as you walk up from, sorry, this is not discussion, this is a question. As you walk up from Main Street is that the first thing you're presented with is that corner and that wall, which is, as you've said, you have a lot of planes on that south facade, but in that one location, it's pretty monolithic on that level. And I'm wondering if you can think of any way to, and you've done it with those window boxes or with that trim. Is there a way to further articulate that facade so that it's just simply not, I mean, I don't remember off the top of my head, but we came up with a length at one point of how many linear feet of 2-story wall it was on that alley. Do you think there's a way you could articulate that a bit more? It's muted. Oh, muted.
Bruce, can you unmute?
Sorry.
There you go.
Okay. I feel like we hit that last time when we got onto the southeast deck and the detailing around that historic stone retaining wall, which you come around the corner from the free box there. So right now, instead of, the mast does step back 12 feet from the front porch, right? So that's a deck. So that's already a gap. I think that's a good move. And then now the kitchen it's only 26 feet wide until it goes to that 7-foot covered deck, which again is another level of whatever shadow and breaking it up. Overall, the kitchen space itself, including that covered deck, is looks like 34 feet. And I don't know, it seems like a very common length, not dissimilar from what's there now in the log cabin. I feel like it's very well broken up, and I think the conversation that we had came after another project in a similar situation, saying, you want to step it down in the alley, but this house has to be a house for a certain depth for it to function. So, and I would also just kind of put in there too, I know we're trying to step down this thing to the west. This is 2 duplexes. It's not a main house and a secondary, which is simply allowed by the zoning. And I think that we're trying to achieve both.
Okay, other questions for Bruce? Okay, if not, thank you, Bruce. Let's hear from the public. All right. Would you raise your hand, please, electronically, if you'd like to comment? Any public comment?
I don't see any.
I'll give it just another minute here. Please raise your hand if you'd like to comment. Going once. Going twice. I guess that's it. Okay, no public comment. So we'll go ahead and start deliberations. And there's 13 conditions. Just to frame it up, I think they're all easily definable and answerable, except perhaps number 1 and possibly number 3. However, if we leave the conditions the same, I believe that John and I could say yes or no that it complies, depending on this conversation that we're about to have. So I'd really be interested in, particularly on 1 and 3, everybody's comments, which might lead to continuance versus or approval. So who wants to go first on 1 through 13, first of all?
Sure, I can jump into it, Mark. I think 1 through 13 are wholly appropriate. I think there are a number of ways of achieving 1 and 3 to your point. I wouldn't necessarily change the wording on them to be more specific. That's not really my gig, but if you feel confident that approval with the conditions written as they are something you can parse afterwards, I'm I have all the faith in the world in you, so. But and I also don't have anything else to add. I think those conditions cover it.
Okay, well, I mean, I would speak for myself, but together with John, we're not gonna approve something that when it says step down to the west, that doesn't step down to the west to some degree that it falls into compliance with the guidelines. But, and as Bruce said, is it 1 foot or 2 foot? Well, I can say that it's at least 2 foot as I look at it here, but again, maybe pull something back. I don't want to be overly prescriptive as you just said. But I want to see how everybody else feels here too. Other comments, Bob, Stacy, Andrew?
Well, Mark, I'll say that, you know, since Bruce pretty much agreed to number two affects also then number one, right? There, by pulling back the deck at the southwest corner, it also enhances the apparent step down to the western alley. Those two are connected and they go together. I think this is in both number one and number three. I think it's easy to let a two-dimensional elevation cloud our judgment, perhaps. I'm probably guilty of it myself. As soon as Bruce, to my earlier question, pointed out to me that, you know, the deck is pulled back from the street, and there's an additional deck on the back, and, you know, in elevation that's not as apparent, but when you look at the three-dimensional views from the corners, I think there is more stepping down than the elevations convey. I'm not as concerned with number one. I think that north-south alley or the west alley is a super subordinate alley. I mean, it's kind of it's only present for half a block. Well, it goes then across the street into the north, but short of doing some sort of traffic study, I mean, how much traffic does that alley really get? Not a great deal, I wouldn't think. I'm more concerned with the south elevation, and like Bruce, I, in reading these guidelines, struggle with the make it traditional, make it separate. That's an inherent contradiction. And that, so then this starts to go to number four, that the projecting windows on the south elevation. I think the attempt there is to further break up that plane when you come up past the free box and the tea shop. So I can see where Bruce is making the effort to comply with these conditions. My fear is that we're forcing him into a pretty eclectic, set of solutions.
Who else would like to comment?
I first read through this. I totally agree with 1 through 13 and thought it should be continued. And I think that Bruce is capable of responding to these with a solution that would be acceptable. I guess I could trust Mark and Jana to review this if that's the consensus of the group. But my original thought was that we should see it again.
Andrew?
I mean, I just kind of want to sound off on what Stacy was talking about. You know, when you're looking in that west alley, I do think, from three-dimensional, not to be, as he stated, fogged, by looking at this 2D, I do think it provides a little bit of stepping down. It's obviously hard to tell exactly how much in these renderings. And he was comparing a lot of it to, and in the deck as well, as to the people who have just renovated that house. I guess it's more to the west there. But there are a lot of different planes there, and that alley, like you said, is half a block. I mean, I'm not as much concerned of that as I am, of the south side. That's just kind of my take on it.
Well, more often than not, if we still had a mass and scale issue, we typically want to see it again. But I think the south alley facade is, which is part of mass and scale, is something that's just not quantitative that I think John and I could judge, but I'm on the fence. I could go either way with, I do agree with the 13 conditions. I would say this on number one, if it came to John and I would have to say that it would have to be more than just the reduction of the deck, and number two, something slightly more to step back from that corner or step down. I would not approve it if it was just the reduction of the deck. I could not do that in good faith. So if that motivates anybody to say, to approve it or send it our way or continue it, I'll do whatever the pleasure of the board is here. Guess that didn't help.
Make a motion or straw poll on the continue first.
Let's just do the straw poll, Kieran. Go ahead. You start. Since you brought it up.
Yeah. Me and my stupid mouth. I guess I would support continue. I mean, I can go either way, honestly, but to your point about how we've traditionally handled it, continue would be probably the way I would lean.
My reservation about approving it is actually, Mark, that I think you might be more restrictive than I as a board member would be.
I thought that might be coming. I'm rarely accused of that, by the way, rarely.
So, I mean, if I have to voice my opinion as Paul, I would move to approve. I mean, I would move to continue, so that the full board we can continue to work our way through these instead of throwing it in your lap.
That's why I expose myself with my opinion.
I agree. Continue it.
All right, Andrew, you good?
Yes. Continue.
Let's have a motion to continue, and we'll see this again, which hopefully, Bruce, it won't take very long. If you can work with Jonna, please go in and see her before you just turn it in and see where you can get to. Thank you. Go ahead, Bob.
Can I ask if we do, it says to the December 14th, that's appropriate? I thought on one, we just crossed it off and we didn't know when we were gonna see it again. But
That's my recommendation.
this is a recommendation from you. That's
All right, if we're ready, I can do the motion if you like.
Yes, Kieran.
Sure. I move to continue to December 14th, 2022 HARC meeting, the large scale new construction located at 121 North Pine Street, lots 1 and 3, block 5, town of Telluride, based on the findings of the staff memo dated October 19th, 2022, and with the following conditions 1 through 13 as stated. This motion is based on evidence of testimony provided at a public hearing held on October 19th, 2022, with notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code.
We have a second.
Second. Oh,
no, you're good. You're good. Stacy's got the second on that.
Good. Let's vote.
Kieran, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Bob, yes.
Andrew, yes.
And Mark, yes. Okay, we'll see him next time.
Take a
Somebody
short-
let,
Thanks, Bruce.
yeah,
Take a short break.
little bio break for 5 minutes. Let's get Matt back there and
Yes. I'll text him.
Stacy, I know you have to recuse yourself.
Yeah. I can wait. Do I have to wait till you open the item?
No.
Okay, then, Mark, I need to recuse myself from the next item, due to a contractual relationship, as in my employer.
That sounds very official. Okay. As long as Matt's coming back, I'm gonna have to
Kieran.
get off the phone. No, I'm not going through security. I'm just, my temperature's rising.
Oh.
Can you see I look
We got it.
kind of flush? No, I look red. Oh, I'm sorry, Kieran, if you could
No, we're
take
good.
us to, take us to the finish line. And I'm gonna let you go. I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well.
No, go take care of yourself, Mark.
All right. Thanks all. Thank you very much.
Oh, how many recusals? Mark as well? I didn't choose Mark's is out.
He might not make it.
Okay. Oh. See you all next month.
Yeah, dude. We're all back, right? Oh, Andrew.
Hold in here. Do we have any control over this? This one? I don't get too hot. Was that cool?
I don't think it ever gets too hot. Oh, it's so cool.
Harper.
All right, let's roll on to we're good. Fourth and final hearing item for the evening. Project title is 503 Curtis. Summary consideration of a small scale new construction in the residential zone district, which is located outside the THLP within the HPOD and will contain 1,500 square feet or more of floor area, but not more than 2,500 square feet of floor area per LUC 7-203B. 1.b. Legal description is Lot 1, Block 5, code addition to the town of Telluride, according to the plat recorded July 20th, 1901, in plat book 28, page 22, San Miguel, state of Colorado. Address 503 Curtis Drive, Zone District Residential. Owner 339 North Townsend LLC. Applicants are Alpine Planning LLC and Behind Architects. Staff member Erica Jensen.
Thank you. All right, we are here for the final small scale review at 503 Curtis Drive. We received public comment from Dan Goodall and Billy Nelson. Did everyone have time to review those comments? Great. I would like to remind HARC to only review things within their purview as well. This project is located on a corner lot fronting on Curtis Drive with North Townsend to the east. It is a relatively steep lot with no existing structures and little vegetation. It is in the residential zone district and in the hillside transitional treatment area, and it is outside the historic district, but it does abut it. The project description is for small scale new construction of a 2,078 square foot structure. Condition 1 is to further define the pedestrian entrance on Curtis and simplify the pedestrian entrance on Townsend. The proposed building does not maintain the traditional building orientation. It appears the primary pedestrian entrance is located off Townsend, with a secondary entrance off of Curtis. The Townsend entrance is rather elaborate and makes it appear that the main entrance and that the building should front on Townsend when it actually fronts on Curtis. Condition 2 is to revise the second level shed roof form to be of a more traditional design. The second level shed roof is rather untraditional as it does not attach to any other building form and it is a different pitch from the shed roof below. The guidelines encourage roof forms that are similar to those found in established residential areas. And while shed roofs are a traditional roof form, it is the lack of attachment to a building form that makes this untraditional. Condition 3 is to revise the timber columns to be painted or stained for a more finished appearance. While the list of building materials does specify that the timbers are finished with an amber stain, they still have an appearance of being unfinished. This would be more appropriate for an alley or secondary structure, but not on the primary structure. Condition 4 is to reduce the amount of glazing on the east elevation. The amount of glazing on the east elevation does cause concern over light spill. Condition 5 is to significantly reduce the number of skylights, and condition 6 is to remove the 2 skylights on the second level shed roof. The house has 11 proposed skylights, which does not align with the design guidelines, which encourage skylights to be limited in number. And they also encourage the skylights to be placed in locations that minimize visibility, and the 2 skylights on the second level shed roof are highly visible. Condition 7 is to ensure that all doors are 2/3 light. Condition 8 is to add snow guard brakes or other devices to the west side of the roof to prevent snow and ice shedding onto adjacent properties. And condition 9 is to remove the sconces on upper level decks as those are not allowed. And then I have added 2 additional conditions after discussing the easement with Public Works. Condition 10 is that no trees or shrubs may be planted in the easement. And condition 11 is that the applicant must work with Public Works prior to the issuance of a building permit to ensure that their driveway is compliant with town requirements. And I am happy to answer any questions before we hear from the applicants who are both on Zoom.
I have just a quick question. Remove the 2 skylights from the second level shed roof. Did you mean that what's considered level 1? The one that's over the, at the very front of the building? Those skylights? Yeah,
Yes,
that's the one you're referring to.
yes.
So that actually would be it's the roof, well, here on level, well, let's see, level 1, level 2. It's actually the roof of level 1. Just to make sure that that's the ones you're talking about,
Yes,
that face Curtis.
yes. Yep.
Okay,
Any other questions?
Any questions? If not,
I have one, just a quick question. Can you elaborate on the number 3 about the painted or stained? Looking at the documents, it's like they do call out a stain, so.
Yeah, and I realized that the stain, it looks like, is extremely minimal, like an amber stain that I think leaves them still with a pretty unfinished look, like a very rustic look that might be more appropriate on an alley structure. So maybe a stain that makes them more appropriate for a primary structure would be ideal, or painting.
Okay, thank you.
just to clarify again, since we talked about the skylights, the number 2, the second level shed roof we're talking about is not the one over that the deck area at the on Curtis. It's the one that's further back where we have the steel, where we have the wood timbers. Is that correct?
We're talking about this one right here.
It's above the master bedroom, correct?
It's the ones you
Yes.
and I just pointed out.
Yeah, on level 1.
It's the same shed roof as the one with
In
the
the front.
skylights. Yep, in the front.
Okay. I think we should clarify that.
Any other questions for Erica? Now let's go ahead and turn it over to Tommy and Chris.
Thank you. Good evening, Chris Hawkins with Alpine Planning. Erica, could you please email me those letters that you referenced earlier? Because we didn't get a copy of those.
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So thanks. We're glad to be in front of HARC this evening. The site's a fairly unique site in the town. Some of you hopefully got up there to see it. It's actually a corner lot. The Townsend right away proceeds up the hillside here. And then, so the lot is again 25 feet wide down here. So when you're looking up, kind of through the lot as well, it's truly is a corner lot. Right here, the Townsend right away here, and then Curtis Drive in the front. So as far as the site plan itself, because it is a corner lot, the site design really incorporates 2 pedestrian entries. One being from Townsend Street with a pedestrian entry on the side, and another from Curtis Drive, which is more of a kind of a secondary or primary entrance, depending upon who's coming to your house. But I'll show you some images of those entries here in a second. Rock fall fence in the back, step down with retaining walls, spa area, home that steps down the hillside, and then the driveway overall. As far as the design, looking at it, again, it does step up the hillside quite a bit with various modules, and you can see the retaining walls designs. If you have any questions about those, be glad to answer them. Got a little trash service area off to the side, and then, just a series of decks and shed roof forms, a little bit of a flat roof form here behind a shed roof form, gable, all oriented to the town grid. It's just a massing view that's kind of from the northwest. As far as the massing overall, if you look at the site, there is one at home on this side. I'm not sure if that's who sent the letter or not, but that gentleman may or may not have made public comments. Would like to respond if there were some comments on it, but the massing is very much in line with that house. There are a lot of design elements in this house that again show the stepping and keeping some of these views to the south from the home that exists in the area. There's a more of a front view of the house, again showing some of the design elements. The exterior material palette's fairly simple: wood, stone, metal, glass, kind of the typical palette with some board form concrete elements. And then we did want to get into the HARC conditions a little bit, further define the pedestrian entrance. Again, I always like going back to see what the design guidelines say. Again, TH12C, building fronts that orient to the established street grid are encouraged. Again, it's a corner lot. It has 2 primary fronts, with one onto Curtis Drive and the other secondary front onto Townsend, which are clearly identifiable pedestrian entrances. And they're also, again, it's a building front is oriented to the town grid. In the front elevation, there's clearly a front door and a front oriented to the grid. And this is again a side entry door on the coming off the Townsend up the path right there. Condition 2, revise the second shed form to be more of a traditional.
Hey, Chris, I just want to interject too. I think it's important to note, because it's a corner lot and it's still just a 25-foot lot, we had to deal with a 5-foot setback. So, the massing on this is extremely narrow. So we've tried to be creative along the east side to create a more traditional scale. And, right now, the overall, the typical width on a 25 is 19. And here we're down to 17. So I just wanted to point that out. So we did have to be a little creative, because we only have a 17-foot wide facade. So, we have simplified some of these approaches just purely out of scale, and the LUC requiring that 5-foot eastern setback. So keep going, Chris.
Okay, no, thanks, Tommy. I meant to bring that up, so thank you. Again, revising the second level shed roof form to be a more traditional design. Again, it says HR, but I'm assuming it's TH20B and TH20A. use roof forms similar to those found traditionally in the established residential areas, and it clearly contemplates shed roof forms like we have proposed. So we're a little confused on what the concern is there with the shed roof forms. And again, use roof forms that are seen traditionally in the area at TH20A. And again, shed roof forms are typical and appropriate. So we clearly have a shed roof design. I'm not sure what the concern here is. And so that getting some clarity on that would be helpful. HARC condition 3, revise the timber columns. There's already been a conversation on this. TH25A4 and D. Again, exterior wood finishes should be painted or stained. It doesn't really say that you have to use an opaque stain or a translucent stain or whatever. We are using a, probably a more semi-transparent stain to keep that rustic or natural finish. And it is considered, at least in this instance, appropriate in the area because it's outside the historic district. It's in a sloped area in the transitional hillside area. And so we're hopeful you'll consider allowing what's a little bit different design to really show some heavy timber design on the home and with a more natural finish.
Well, I think speaking to that a little more to that, Chris and Erica, we do appreciate your interpretations. I think we're taking this transitional hillside zone district, and we would like to integrate this particular block. Especially, I'd like to move in more of a natural tones and a little bit more stone and timber because of the slope of the site. And this whole block, because of the steepness, it's really, to me, it's moving from transitional hillside into developing hillside. So, I think the HARC board, I guess I'm asking you guys to take a look at, how our guidelines move from, these shallower sites to steeper sites, and how the roof forms, how the materials, they tend to get more rustic as we get steeper and move into the hillside. So from a sensitivity standpoint, I think we want to have more natural colors and tones as we see Curtis develop. And I'm working on a few more houses a little further down on Curtis. And you're going to see the evolution that I'm envisioning here. But I think that's the right move on Curtis.
So condition 4, reduce the amount of glazing on the east elevation consistent with these design guidelines. Again, TH27A, large expanses of windows, minimize visual impacts, and then, position lighting to minimize visual impacts from lower viewpoints, and then minimizing the amount of glass facing south to the town below. So I think this was more of a concern to the east, so I'm not sure if this one's as relevant. But just a little confused on what ESA 3 was about. We get the whole point of light spill. The eastern window areas are modest with traditional rectangular windows, double windows, and triple windows as approved. We've seen elsewhere in the hillside transitional treatment area, all windows will have interior shading. And the south window facade, I don't believe was a concern for staff for the HARC condition, but maybe there can be some clarity on that. And again, the window and door area is approved on that south facade, and I want to go back to that briefly. This is a fairly common arrangement that we're seeing with 2/3 light, sliding trifold doors. We've been seeing, some concern there, but I think Tommy has done and designed these in a fairly modest scale on the south elevation. And then certainly on the east elevation, again, we have a very traditional rectangular window pattern going across the east facade, and then some groupings of 3 rectangular windows, which we've seen approved in this area, and then a grouping of 2 windows. So again, we're not really sure what the concern is on this facade, because it's not a huge amount of glass when you look across the whole facade, and it's a fairly good window to wall area ratio. So I think, Tommy, did you have any concluding thoughts you want to make before we wrap up?
No, I think that's it. I mean, overall, I think it's a really, I think it's a smaller house, and I think we tried to be creative how we address the corner on such a narrow lot. And I think the way we've used kind of these timber elements and these deck elements to break up the massing, I think is a pretty interesting strategy. And overall, I think it does what we want it to do in terms of the guidelines on some of these challenging lots that are still left in town.
So, thank you. Glad to
All right.
answer any questions.
Great. Does anyone have questions?
I just have a clarification question. So the land to the east of this lot, is that a town right of way? That's not another lot. Is that correct?
That is the Townsend right away. That's correct.
Yeah, it's a Townsend right of way, exactly.
Yeah, let me go back to the site plans so I can show you that a little better. Here's the existing conditions plan that shows the right of way here.
Yeah, and so you've got room, you've got room to park. There's probably an extra 30 feet to the traveled way.
Yes. So this shows the bird's eye view. It's just a green right away like we see throughout the town.
And it's a dead end, or it's the last lot. So there's a lot of open space there that flows into this property.
And
I
so
walked up there today and it appeared to me that the people that are at the end of Townsend and slightly to the east were using that for their parking. I didn't see, I'm not sure that house even had parking, like a garage or a carport.
Well, yeah, I mean, what we're trying to do too, Bob, is we're trying not to have people, Curtis is so narrow. We're trying to encourage people to use that end of Townsend rather than, Curtis being so narrow. And we have recessed our garage so that you can actually get another car in the driveway below that carport. So, we were sensitive, and I've talked to these neighbors. I talked to Bill Nelson. I've talked to a couple of these neighbors, about making sure we had at least 2 tandem spots on site. And then in addition, creating these pedestrian access points from Townsend that further eased up any congestion onto the narrow Curtis. So there has been quite a bit of thought put into how this will function and how we can minimize the impact to Curtis.
So, I really would like to respond to the public comments, but I still don't have them in my email.
Oh.
So if we could get those emailed out.
Chris, they're also here to make public comments, so we'll hear from them in a minute.
Okay, well, I guess we just reserve the right to respond to those comments, please, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, you always do.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Everybody's good. Then if there are no other questions, we can turn it over to public comment. You folks do want to. Okay, so you state your name for the record. Try to keep it to. Try to keep your comments to about 3 minutes if you can. And just as a reminder, this is not a dialogue.
My name's Dan Goodall, and I've got a property on Curtis, 517 Curtis Drive. And that property went through HARC a little over 3 years ago. It's been extended. When I went through HARC at that time, I'd always seen the easement, this 10-foot easement. You'll also probably run into see a 5-foot easement that was later stated, but there was a 10-foot ingress easement along Curtis on all these lots. So I just assumed the landowners got together and said, okay, the street's too narrow. Let's just agree to use everybody's property. Well, after spending a bit of time up on Curtis, I realized this street doesn't function at all. 15 feet wide, you can't pass people at all. So people are constantly backing up, back and forth. on the street. I did some document research, and it turns out that 40 years ago, town required Proctor developers to widen the road 50 or widen the road another 10 feet to 25 feet because they were concerned about emergency services, just the road to be able to function. There was another document I included in that package that showed the town engineer said, yeah, over on Curtis, we required widening of Curtis for another red. So, you know, kind of changed my opinion, even though I have a 33-foot, my house is set back 33 feet, plenty of room to address the easement. You know, I got thinking, wow, this is a big concern, and the residents at the end are really concerned. So, you know, it seems like the town required the geo study, required the rockfall fence, but the probability of somebody getting hurt on Curtis Drive that people have to back up, to me, is a higher probability of something happening or emergency services not being able to get down the road and all the houses burning out. To me, is a bigger concern than even the rockfall. So I think it was a simple solution. They said that every developer would widen the road. It's not Public Works that has to widen it. Every developer should widen the road. I think, you know, makes sense to have a B-pan on the north side of that. And I know in this applicant, I think, well, I don't know exactly when the driveway starts to slope. I can't tell, but it looks like the driveway does start to slope, and possibly within that 10-foot. So I'd like to see this continued until emergency service, fire department, Public Works can decide, you know, and you know, come up with a solution to make sure that this thing is widened appropriately when any of these lots get developed. I think the only other thing is, you know, all the other, there's been 4 applicants that have gone through HARC recently. Everybody has 2 off-street parks. So I'm not sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Billy Nelson. I live on the west end of Curtis Drive, the first house in the narrow lawns. There's potential on the street for 12 homes, which, you know, could be 20 cars. It's 15 feet wide. It's not enough for 2 cars to pass each other. And this 10-foot easement is just so necessary. It's impossible to imagine what it would be like with 25 cars, 20 cars on that street. We're all obligated to have 2 parking spaces, off-street parking spaces. At the west end, where the smaller lots are, we all have 2 car parking garages, or one single garage and an off-street parking space. This 10-foot easement is absolutely mandatory for you know, for fire, for a turning radius onto Curtis Drive from the fire trucks. So my feeling is that we need to have this deal continued until the fire marshal chime in with what they want. The Public Works can put into this whatever they want as far as widening the street. You know, with this subterranean garage right at the turn, it's almost impossible. Especially, there's not a drainage plan. I don't see how this could be improved with a subterranean garage right at the corner. It's a really icy corner. It's completely treed, and so there's no sun. It's a dangerous corner to start with, and to have the driveway go off of it right at the corner, and go downhill into a subterranean garage. Is a bottleneck for one thing and very dangerous situation. I think that 10-foot easement should be used, and nothing should be in that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, do we have anybody online looking to make comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment, and Tommy and Chris, you feel free to
Sure.
about that.
Yeah, thank you. So the 10-foot easement is, yeah, there's some landscaping in it right now, but that's an easy removal. So that's an easy change and that can just be added as a condition of approval. We get it. That's an easement of record that encumbers the property. To somehow put additional levels of regulations and requirements that aren't on this lot per the land use code, I'm not sure we can do that. Like to require 2 parking spaces when only one's required. I think that would be a pretty big stretch. Besides that, there is additional parking here in the Townsend Street right away. Even though these folks might be using it, they're only using 1 space and there's additional room for parking here if needed. So it's not going to be an issue with that as far as parking goes. I think that'd be a big ask, is all of a sudden on a corner lot that's already encumbered by a 5-foot setback on this side and a 3-foot setback on that side, to now provide 2 parking spaces that are 16 feet wide. And so we couldn't even have a front lower entry or egress. It's just physically impossible to do it on this lot. You know, to even continue an item to have a fire district review for fire code, that already happens with the building permit. And again, not seeing the need for adding regulations that aren't applicable on this lot. I'm not sure if Tommy has anything to add to that.
Well, yeah, I do. And Bill and Dan, I mean, what I need you guys to do, and I've talked to both you guys about this, is we need to collectively approach town engineering on the other lots that I'm doing down the way. And I'm very open to widening the street all the way down. I've actually have that in my previous, in my submissions for the other houses, Bill. So, you know, I think this is more of a broader discussion of, you know, how do we make this wider the whole way? So to me, this is, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to do with this. I think it has to do with the whole block and how we address widening of the whole block. But, you know, I've tried to have that discussion with Karen. I've tried, and so I could use your guys' help. And, you know, I think the time to address the widening of the street is with those other applications, and to have you guys, you know, help me and go to the town collectively with all the neighbors and say, hey, we'd like to widen Curtis the whole way. In that case, what we're doing here isn't preventing that from happening. It's just allowing us, you know, to respect what's there now, but obviously still be able to accommodate any widening down the road.
Great, do you guys have anything else to add for now?
No, thank you.
Great. I saw that Jessie Ray had her hand raised. I think it'd be fine to have her weigh in, yeah?
Her hand is not raised any longer. I'll ask her to unmute. There she goes.
Thanks, guys. I just wanted to echo what Tommy just said, because I think it's a very opportune time to discuss this particular road, and if it's going to be developed more, how do we keep people safe? He actually said everything I wanted to say. So thank you, Tommy. And let's try and figure out a way that we can talk to the town and Public Works and everybody else up there to widen the road, so this is not as big of a concern.
Right, and I thank you, Jessie Ray. John, can you weigh in about the purview, or Erica, both of you?
It is on, I just want to add, it is on Public Works radar. It is on our radar. Town will be discussing it. That's about all I think is the purview part right now, but we are well aware of the issue, and town is discussing how to address it.
think the new public works director is aware of the situation. Maybe it's been overlooked for a while. I just want to remind Hark that the street or the width of the street and easement is not in Hark's purview. So while we appreciate all the public comments, and I think it's helpful to get it on public works radar, that it should not be a topic of discussion for Hark. Erica added those conditions to address the elimination of anything in the easement, and that they work with public works to work out the driveway.
Right, and same thing goes for the number of parking spaces, that whole.
Yep.
So as we're deliberating this, those really are not on the table. So if you bring it up, I'm gonna shut you down.
Yes, sir.
I would like to add two things before deliberation begins. On the memo, number 2, it should be TH on both of those and not HR. My apologies. And on number 4, my apologies again, please eliminate ES number 3.A.
Which was that again? Excuse me.
Number 4, eliminate ES number 3.A.3. That does
Just
not
cross
apply.
it out.
Yeah, just cross it out. My apologies for that.
No, you're all good. And just again, so we're all clear, I'm gonna read those 2 conditions that Erica subsequently added. That's would be number 10, no trees or shrubs may be planted in the easement. And number 11, the applicant must work with Public Works prior to the issuance of a building permit to ensure that their driveway is compliant with town requirements. So again, let's not have any discussion on things that aren't in our purview, but how do we feel about the motion, particularly 1 through 9? I know the applicants were looking for specific feedback on 2, 3, and 4. But if you could address how you feel about 1 through 9, and then we can go from there.
I can jump in. I would strike number 3, and other than that, and the slight corrections about the references and the levels on number 2 and number 6, I would advance the motion as staff has written it. I just to elaborate, I appreciate what the applicant's trying to do with this secondary entrance on Townsend. I don't feel that strongly that the entrance on Curtis needs to be elaborated much more, but it seems like a simplification of the pedestrian entrance on Townsend would be a good idea.
Simplification of it.
Well, it's sort of this really large roof form with all this timber structure, and it's really sort of screaming that this is the entrance. And I think if that was scaled down a bit, that would be helpful.
I think that the issue I have with it is that the entrance off of Curtis it's going into the garage. It's not really a formal way you want to go into a house if you come to visit. Where would you want to go? And I think also if you come to visit, you think that's a garage door, a door into a garage probably. How do you know where the other one is? You know, it's way around the corner. If it's snowing hard, how you gonna find it if you've never been there before?
I don't think you're gonna miss the entrance they have designed right now.
No, I mean, yeah, as you come in here, you may not even notice that until you get around there. I don't know.
But Matt, you weren't necessarily suggesting striking number 1 or even modifying it all that much.
No, the only thing I would strike is number 3. I agree with all the other conditions with the little corrections that we talked about. And just again, to elaborate on number 1, the biggest thing I would like to see is the massing of the roof for the Townsend entrance to be scaled down or de-emphasized.
As part of, that'd be a new condition.
It would just be number 1.
Do you suggest reworking
okay.
number 1 as focus on it, or just leave it as is?
I could leave it as is, but it seems like, especially since Bob is suggesting that more so than I am, that the pedestrian entrance on Curtis is further defined. I was just trying to elaborate on my thoughts.
No, appreciate that.
I guess, do you want to define it further or de-emphasize it?
I mean, as the petition currently stands is further define the pedestrian entrance on Curtis and simplify the one on Townsend. So it does both
It does.
as the conditions currently written.
So you'd want to emphasize Curtis entry over the Townsend entry.
Yeah, what I think Erica's condition is getting to just making that primary entrance more noticeable. And as part of that effort, it's also making the secondary entrance less noticeable, so to speak, to really simplify it.
I'd agree. I think that's what it's stating.
Yeah, I think that's what it's saying. I'm
So
not
is there-
quite sure I agree with it.
What would be the?
Yeah, what's
Well, it just didn't seem to me to be emphasizing an entry that goes into the garage over an entry that takes you into the main.
Emphasize
monument.
maybe is the wrong word. Define it better as a primary entrance. So
I think there's similar
Townsend
words, but
entrance?
Curtis entrance. I mean, if you have a different wording on how you'd like.
Yeah,
it to read.
I don't know. This one baffles me a bit as to. I understand the Townsend entrance truly is the main entrance into the house. And the entrance off of Curtis is a secondary entrance for, somebody.
it's really just to meet the land use code, right? Because if they define Townsend as their primary entrance, the
Right.
setbacks would not work with the lot shape. So
Right.
Yeah.
It's a complicated spot to be working on. And I really appreciate the efforts these guys have gone through to
Mhm.
try to put this thing together. I'd say, well, let's see what they come up with. One.
Do you, the rest of 1 through 9?
I guess a question for Erica is, if we were to, is this a final approval?
Yep, small scale.
So, if we were to just leave number 1 as stated, would you be fine, reviewing what, actually, that would be Mark, no, it would be you.
Kieran.
Yeah.
I'll let you.
Would you be fine reviewing it, as stated, or do you want to be more specific? I would prefer not to be specific, but
I think that's always where I fall, even though that it's gonna fall on my shoulders in the end. I think between Eric and I, we can parse that pretty well.
Okay, I think that the applicant did mention about number 2, where it's actually the first level shed roof facing Curtis. More traditional design. I don't know. Other than the angle of it being different than the angle on the real second level, the one that's over the entry, the Townsend entry. That to me, that was the thing. It was just, it was off because it's a different angle than the angle that's up further up.
I think if it matched the angle of the shed roof below it that covers the garage entrance, it would help to bring it in more conformity with the rest of the design. I think the primary thing I'm seeing, and I'm assuming Erica's responding to as well, is the fact that the north side of it sort of dives into this deck with a railing, and it doesn't seem to cap more massing of the project in a more traditional way. I personally feel that if they align those roofs with the same angle, that would help to bring it into more harmony with the rest of the design.
And you're talking these two roofs.
Yes, correct.
Aligned with this one?
Nope.
These two?
No, just
Aren't they the same?
Yeah, no, they're not. They're slightly off.
Okay. Yeah, it was a little bit shallower. Well, I don't want to design it for him, but
That's generally recommended.
I'm trying not.
If you're a skilled architect, no, but
Yeah, I can't help it. I think that would help. Yes, what you're saying.
is there a concern with the wording as it's?
I think it leaves chance to
Take a look at it.
Great. Andrew, you got anything?
No.
Does anyone else agree with my striking of number 3, or do you think it should stay?
Yeah, we need to circle
think
back to it.
I'm fine with removing it.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, the idea that it kind of matches the more natural tone, I think is acceptable. I know it's like says in there rustic, but I mean, it's also, they're trying to blend it in to the natural landscape as well. I think that's
Yeah.
pretty creative on their end, so to speak.
Just for my 2 cents, I tend to agree that it should be more reserved for secondary, more rustic type structures. So my personal preference would be to leave it in. That being said, it does look like it's 3-1 on that. So if that's the desire of the board, we will strike it.
Well, what was your? I'm fine with striking it.
Yeah.
I'd make a motion.
Why don't I make them? Maybe I should make, because I have the 2 additional.
Okay, sure.
If you guys don't, if that's not too much of a breach of protocol for everybody. Let's roll then. Take one quick note here and we'll go. Okay. I move to approve the small scale application at 503 Curtis Drive, Lot 1, Block 5, Dakota Edition, based on the findings of the staff memo dated October 19th, 2022. And with the following conditions. Number 1 is stated. Number 2, revise the first level shed roof form to be of a more traditional design per TH number 20B and TH number 22A. Strike number 3. Number 4, reduce the amount of glazing on the east elevation consistent with TH 27A, ES2B1, and then striking the ES3A3. Number 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 as stated. And then there's number 10, no trees or shrubs may be planted in the easement. And number 11, the applicant must work with Public Works prior to the issuance of a building permit to ensure that their driveway is compliant with town requirements. This motion is based on evidence and testimony provided at public hearing held on October 19th, 2022, with such notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code.
I may need, let me know if you agree with this, to make a correction on number 6, remove the 2 skylights from the first level shed roof that's facing Curtis for TH 27D1.
I would agree with that. I was gonna bring that up.
We changed it on
We get
2.
could we get a second real quick?
I'll second.
Okay. Bob, you are proposing an amendment to,
Yes.
could you please restate that?
Remove the 2 skylights on the first level shed roof for TH number 27D1.
I accept that.
I'll accept it as well.
Great.
But does anyone else have any friendly amendments? You better not, because we didn't discuss any. Oh, I have to read that too. I got it, sorry. I have to finish the thing. I didn't finish it appropriately, so. For the record, revised plans incorporating the conditions of approval shall be submitted within 60 days of the approval, or this approval becomes null and void unless otherwise indicated. The revised drawing submitted for a certificate of appropriateness may be a complete set with any changes to the drawings clouded and labeled. Any changes to the drawings beyond the conditions of approval may result in more than one submittal being required. But does that require a redo of anything else? Revote or
Do you do more second seconds from the amendments? Are you guys okay with?
we're good with it?
I would prefer for that to be an amendment, and then, so then we'll second that.
Okay, so that was an amendment
Yes, that was an amendment.
to the motion.
I'll second.
And I accept that, so yeah. Cool.
It's recorded. So I will listen to it. Because I don't want you to have to repeat everything, so
I can do it if that's gonna make your life easier.
you don't have to.
I think it's okay.
I think it's okay.
My apologies for that.
No worries.
All right, we're good, so we're gonna vote. I'll go last. So.
Matt, yes.
Bob, yes.
Andrew, yes.
And Kieran, yes. Sorry again for screwing that up. All right.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you
you
very much.
guys.
Yep.
I still have to chair this thing all the way to.
Do we have any other business?
Just adjournment, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so with that, we are going to, with no board and staff discussion, adjourn at 9:09.
It's just